Looking back now, I can see all the little threads that led me to that god-forsaken trail. I was 27 then, still had that cocky, know-it-all swagger that only youth and a string of uneventful years can give you. I lived in a small mountain town, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and hiking wasn't just a hobby, it was practically a civic duty. I'd been exploring these woods since I was old enough to tie my own boots, charting every creek and peak within a 50-mile radius, or so I thought. My mistake, the first of many, was thinking I was invincible out there and that I knew everything about these woods. The second, and perhaps the biggest, was going alone. It was late autumn, almost winter, a time when the trails usually thin out, most sensible folks opting for warm fires and hot cocoa. But I thrived on that crisp, silent air, the rustle of dry leaves underfoot, the way the bare branches etched sharp lines against a pale sky. That particular Saturday, a friend had buylaid on our planned hike, a sudden flu hitting him hard. I considered postponing, but the itch to hit the trail was too strong. I packed a light daypack water, a few energy bars, a multi-tool, my phone with notoriously spotty service out there, and a basic first aid kit. Standard stuff. Nothing to indicate the day would be anything but routine. I chose the Blackwood Ridge Trail, an old favorite. It wasn't particularly challenging, a good 5-mile loop that offered some decent views. I'd walked it countless times. I knew every route, every switchback, every patch of mossy rock, or so I believed. I pulled up to the trailhead around 9, the morning air biting cold but clear. The parking lot was empty, just as I'd hoped. Perfection. I slung my pack, pulled on my gloves, and started walking, the familiar crunch of gravel under my boots a comforting rhythm. The first mile was exactly as I remembered it. A gentle ascent through a dense canopy of pines and skeletal oaks, the path well-worn, bordered by ferns that had long since withered to a brittle brown. I was maybe a mile and a half in, cresting a small rise when I first felt it, not saw it or heard it, but felt it. It was a subtle shift in the air, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. The kind of feeling you get when a stranger is watching you, even before you turn around. I stopped, scanning the woods, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just the silent, stoic trees, their branches interlaced like bony fingers. The silence, though, felt different. It wasn't the usual deep, peaceful quiet of the forest, punctuated by distant bird calls or the rustle of a squirrel. This was a heavy, almost breathless silence, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. I shrugged it off, attributing it to being alone, my senses heightened by the solitude, just my imagination playing tricks. Then I looked at the trail ahead. My trail, the Blackwood Ridge Trail, and it was wrong. The path, usually a clear, well-defined line, seemed to take an odd, sharper turn than I remembered, bending around a cluster of 3 particularly gnarled old maples that should have been further to my left. It was a slight deviation, barely noticeable, but it was there. My brow furrowed. Had they done some kind of rerouting? It was unlikely without any signage. I walked forward cautiously, telling myself I was just misremembering a minor detail, but a cold, small knot of unease began to tighten in my gut. The trees, those old, familiar maples, seemed to loom a little closer, a little more watchful than they ever had before. I told myself it was just the isolation playing tricks. The way the light filtered through the thinning canopy, casting long, distorted shadows. The cold, maybe I was coming down with something, my friend's flu just now catching up to me. I took a deep breath, trying to dispel the growing prickle of fear. No, it wasn't fear, it was annoyance. Annoyance that my familiar trail, my sanctuary, was suddenly feeling foreign. I took another step, then another. The path underfoot, while still appearing well-worn, felt different somehow. The usual mix of packed earth and small, smooth stones was replaced by a softer, muddier texture, even though it hadn't rained in days. My boots, accustomed to the dry crunch, sunk slightly with each step, a subtle give that was entirely out of place. The air, too, shifted. It grew heavier, colder, despite the sun still being relatively high in the sky. And that oppressive silence deepened, swallowing even the sound of my own footsteps. It was like walking into a sound vacuum, a dead zone where nothing dared to make a noise. The three gnarled maples, which had initially caught my attention, now seemed to press in closer, their ancient bark-covered limbs reaching like skeletal fingers. I reached out, my gloved hand touching the rough bark of the closest tree. It was cold, unnaturally so, even for late autumn. A shiver, not entirely from the cold, traced its way down my spine. This wasn't right. I pulled my hand back, a strange tingling sensation lingering on my fingertips. I continued around the bend, my eyes darting, searching for any familiar sign, any landmark I could latch onto. But everything felt subtly off. The undergrowth, usually sparse this time of year, seemed denser, a tangled mess of brittle branches and thorny bushes that I didn't remember. Patches of moss, a vivid, almost unnatural green, clung to rocks and tree trunks that should have been bare. It was as if the forest was rearranging itself, shifting its features just enough to disorient me. I pulled out my phone, more out of habit than expectation. No service, of course, not a surprise, but still, a small knot of frustration tightened in my chest. I tried to open my GPS app, but it struggled to triangulate my position. Searching for signal, the screen stubbornly read, useless. I always relied on my internal compass, my innate sense of direction honed over years in these woods. But that compass was spinning wildly now, thrown off by the disorienting familiarity. I stopped dead. Up ahead, the path split. This wasn't the Blackwood Ridge Trail. The Blackwood Ridge Trail was a single, clear loop. There were no forks, no alternate routes in this section. My heart began to thump a little harder against my ribs. One path, narrower and overgrown, snaked off to the left, disappearing into a thicket of what looked like rhododendron bushes. The other, continuing straight, looked marginally more traveled, but still not the wide, clear trail I knew. I pulled out my paper map, unfolded it with trembling fingers. I traced my finger along the Blackwood Ridge loop. There it was, clear as day, a single unbroken line. No forks, no diversions. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Had a new unmarked trail been cut? Impossible. The Park Service was meticulous about signage. Had I somehow impossibly wandered onto a different trail entirely? But how? I hadn't seen any turnoffs, any other trailheads. I had been on Blackwood Ridge from the start. I looked back the way I came. The trail behind me, the one I had just walked, seemed to blur, losing its distinctiveness, melting back into the dense, silent forest. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw at the edges of my composure. This wasn't just a minor deviation anymore. This was a complete, inexplicable rewrite of my reality. I chose the straight path, telling myself it was the most logical choice, the one that seemed to continue in the general direction of the original trail. Every step was deliberate, cautious. The air grew colder still, and a thin, wispy fog began to snake through the trees, clinging to the branches, obscuring my vision just enough to make everything seem hazy and indistinct. The sunlight, which had been bright and clear earlier, was now muted, filtered through a murky veil, casting a dull, gray pallor over everything. Then I heard it, a faint sound, barely perceptible at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. But there was no wind. It was a rustling, a dry, scuttling sound that seemed to come from just beyond the range of my vision, moving through the undergrowth parallel to my path. My head snapped up, my eyes darting left and right. Nothing, just the silent, spectral trees, the creeping fog. I stopped again, holding my breath, straining my ears. The sound stopped too. I waited, heart pounding. Nothing. Then, just as I was about to dismiss it as my imagination, a single, brittle twig snapped somewhere to my left, closer this time. It wasn't the heavy snap of a deer or the quick scurrying of a squirrel. It was something lighter, more deliberate, almost hesitant, like someone or something was trying to move quietly but wasn't quite succeeding. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding thin and reedy in the heavy silence. "Is anyone there?" Only the echo of my own voice answered, swallowed quickly by the oppressive quiet. I felt a surge of adrenaline, sharpening my senses, pushing the fear deeper down. This wasn't just my imagination anymore. There was something out here with me. I picked up my pace, a frantic energy seizing me. I needed to get back to the main trail, to any recognizable trail. I kept my eyes peeled, scanning the dense woods, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was paralleling me. The rustling sound resumed, a consistent, dry whisper, always just out of sight, always moving with me. It felt like a game, a silent, predatory game. The path grew steeper, more rugged than I remembered Blackwood Ridge ever being. Roots, thick as my arm, snaked across the path, threatening to trip me. Rocks, slick with the strange moss, made my footing precarious. My lungs burned and sweat beaded on my forehead despite the chill in the air. I kept pushing, driven by an instinct to escape, to outrun whatever was stalking me. Then, through a sudden break in the fog, I saw it, a marker, not a trail marker, but something else. It was a strip of faded, dark cloth tied around the branch of a skeletal birch tree. It looked old, weathered, almost black against the pale bark. It wasn't a familiar marker, not one used by any park service or local hiking club. It looked handmade, primitive. I approached it cautiously, my heart still hammering. The cloth was rough, almost like burlap, stained with something dark and crusty. My stomach churned. It looked like dried blood, and then I saw the symbol, crude, scratched into the bark just beneath the cloth strip. It was a jagged, asymmetrical shape, like a broken star or a splintered eye. It sent a fresh wave of dread through me. This wasn't a hiking trail. This was something else entirely. I backed away slowly, my eyes still fixed on the unsettling marker. The rustling sound stopped. The silence returned, thicker, more menacing than before. I felt exposed, vulnerable. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of this place. But which way was out? I spun around, trying to retrace my steps, but the path behind me had already begun to disappear, consumed by the encroaching fog and the ever-shifting forest. Panic tightened its icy grip around my throat. I was lost, truly, utterly lost, in a place that looked like my familiar woods but wasn't. I fumbled for my multi-tool, pulling out the small blade. A foolish gesture, I knew. What was a tiny blade against whatever force was at play here? But the cool steel in my hand offered a small, irrational comfort. I needed to think. I needed to find north, to find any bearing. I scanned the trees, trying to find a patch of clearer sky, a glimpse of the sun, but the fog was too dense, the canopy too thick. My internal compass was useless, my map outdated, my phone dead to the world. I was relying solely on my own wits, and they felt frayed, stretched thin. I decided to try to cut through the woods, away from the path, hoping to intersect with a known landmark. A creek, a ridge, anything. It was a desperate gamble, but continuing on this trail felt like walking into a trap. I plunged into the dense undergrowth, pushing aside thorny branches, my boots sinking into the soft, damp earth. The silence enveloped me completely, making my own breathing sound impossibly loud. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes, I stumbled upon another marker. This one was different, not cloth, but a small pile of carefully stacked stones forming a crude cairn. And on the topmost stone, painted in what looked like faded red ochre, was the same jagged, splintered eye symbol. It wasn't random. Someone had put these here. Someone who knew this place, who used these symbols. A sickening realization washed over me. These weren't just new, unmarked trails. They were trails for something, or to something, and I was on them. I circled the cairn, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. There was a faint indentation in the earth around it, as if something heavy had been placed there recently. I knelt, my fingers brushing the cold, damp soil. It wasn't just an indentation, it was a depression, a small, circular hollow, perfectly round, as if something had been set down and then lifted. My mind conjured images of ancient rituals, of things best left undisturbed. I quickly stood, feeling an intense urge to distance myself from the sight. The air grew heavy, thick with a strange, sweet smell. It was cloying like decaying flowers and something else, something metallic like old blood. My stomach lurched. I covered my mouth with my hand, trying not to retch. The scent was pervasive, filling my nostrils, making my eyes water. It seemed to emanate from the trees themselves, from the very soil beneath my feet. I pressed on, desperately trying to get away from the smell, from the cairn, from the unnerving symbols. I was no longer trying to find my way back to Blackwood Ridge. I was just trying to escape. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a branch sent a jolt of terror through me. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced I would see eyes watching me from the shadows. The terrain became even more challenging. The ground sloped sharply downwards, leading into a ravine I didn't recognize. The trees here were older, their trunks thicker, their branches more twisted and menacing. The fog was almost impenetrable, reducing visibility to mere feet. I could barely see where I was placing my feet, stumbling over hidden roots and rocks. As I descended, the temperature dropped dramatically. A chilling dampness seeped into my bones, even through my sturdy hiking clothes. And then I started hearing sounds again, not the rustling, but something else. A low, guttural humming, distant and indistinct, yet deeply unsettling. It wasn't animalistic, not like a bear or a wolf. It sounded human, or something that could mimic human sounds. It was a single, drawn-out tone, a dirge-like moan that seemed to resonate with the very silence of the woods. My breath hitched, I froze, pressing myself against the rough bark of a massive oak, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. The humming continued, rising and falling, a mournful, ancient sound that filled the air with a profound sense of dread. It seemed to be coming from the bottom of the ravine, from the deepest part of this nightmare forest. I peered through the swirling fog, my eyes straining to pierce the gloom. Shapes began to emerge, shadowy and indistinct. Was that a structure? At the very bottom, half hidden by the fog and the colossal trees, I thought I saw something man-made, too regular to be natural. A dark, angular mass half swallowed by the earth. A curiosity, a dangerous, reckless impulse warred with the primal urge to flee. What was it? A forgotten cabin, an old mining shack? But the humming, the symbols, the pervasive sense of wrongness, this was not a place of human habitation. Slowly, carefully, I began to creep forward, drawn by a morbid fascination. Each step was agony, the fear a cold knot in my stomach. The humming grew louder, more distinct, but still just a single mournful tone. It filled the air, reverberating in my chest, making my teeth ache. As I got closer, the fog began to thin slightly, revealing more of the structure. It wasn't a cabin. It was a circle of stones, massive and rough-hewn, arranged around a central altar-like slab. It was ancient, moss-covered, almost entirely absorbed by the forest floor, yet still undeniably a structure. A megalithic ruin hidden deep in the mountains, and on the central slab I could clearly make out carvings. The swirling, intricate patterns and that damned splintered eye symbol, repeated over and over again in various sizes. The humming seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves, an almost imperceptible vibration that permeated the air. And then I saw them, not standing but scattered around the circle. Bones, Animal bones, bleached white, some cracked and broken, and among them something else. Something that made my blood run cold. A human skull, empty eye sockets staring up at the gray sky, half buried in the leaves, and beside it a femur snapped cleanly in half. This was not just an ancient ruin, this was a place of sacrifice. My knees almost buckled. The smell of decay and blood was overwhelming now, a thick, nauseating cloud. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. My mind reeled, trying to process the horrifying reality of what I was seeing. This wasn't some lost hiker's remains. These were deliberately placed. This was a site of dark ritual. And then the humming stopped. Abruptly, the silence that followed was even more terrifying than the sound, a heavy, expectant quiet that pressed in on me from all sides. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, even though there was no wind. I spun around, my multi-tool blade clutched tightly in my shaking hand. Nothing, just the impenetrable fog and the ancient trees, their branches like twisted, watching arms. But I felt it. I knew it. Something was there. Something had been humming. Something had been watching. A low growl, deep and resonant, rumbled from somewhere very close, just behind the megalithic circle. It wasn't an animal growl. It was deeper, more sustained, like the earth itself was groaning. It vibrated through the ground, up my legs, into my very bones. My legs, paralyzed by terror only moments before, suddenly found strength. I turned and ran. I didn't care which way, I just ran. Up the steep slope of the ravine, crashing through the undergrowth, heedless of the thorny branches tearing at my clothes, the roots tripping my feet. I scrambled, I clawed, I pushed, driven by a raw, unthinking terror. The growl continued, a relentless, vibrating thrum that followed me, growing louder, closer. I burst out of the ravine, gasping for breath, my lungs burning, my vision blurring with tears and exertion. The fog was still thick, but the terrain felt a little less steep here. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I just ran, fueled by pure, unadulterated panic. Suddenly, my foot caught on something unseen. I pitched forward, sprawling onto the cold, damp earth, my head hitting something hard. A searing pain shot through my temple. The world spun. My vision tunneled, gray encroaching from the edges. I tasted blood. I tried to push myself up, but my arms screamed in protest. A sharp, excruciating pain lanced through my shoulder. I must have landed badly. My vision swam. I could still hear the growl closer now, a low, guttural vibration that seemed to be right behind me. I struggled to my knees, dazed, disoriented. My head throbbed. I fumbled for my phone, a desperate, futile gesture, still no service. The screen was cracked from the fall, useless. Through the swirling gray, I saw it. A shape, tall, impossibly tall, emerging from the fog. It was vaguely humanoid, but twisted, elongated, its limbs too long, too slender. Its head was small, almost featureless, but I could feel its gaze. A crushing, ancient presence that radiated malevolence. And its body, it seemed to be made of shadow and twisted bark, its form shifting, merging with the trees around it. It took a step, a slow, deliberate movement that seemed to consume the distance between us. Another step. The ground trembled faintly with each stride. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of pine and decay, and something else, something sharp and acrid like ozone. My mind screamed, this wasn't real, this couldn't be real. My experienced woodsman's brain, so proud of its logic and knowledge, shattered into a million pieces. This was beyond anything I had ever conceived. I tried to push myself up again, to crawl, to do anything, but my body refused to cooperate. My arm was agony. My head reeled. The creature loomed closer, its form coalescing, becoming more distinct, yet still unnervingly fluid. I could see the texture of its skin, rough, bark-like, with dark, glistening patches that seemed to ooze something thick and black. Its elongated fingers, tipped with razor-sharp claws, twitched. It raised one of its impossibly long arms, slowly, deliberately. The air crackled around it. I could feel the cold radiating from its presence, a soul-sucking chill that seeped into my very core. I couldn't move. I could only stare, paralyzed by a terror so profound it transcended fear. A sound escaped my lips, a choked sob, a whimper I barely recognized as my own. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could disappear, wishing this was all a nightmare, a fever dream brought on by the cold and isolation. But the cold was real. The pain in my arm was real. The smell of decay was real. And the presence, the overwhelming, crushing presence of this thing was horrifyingly, irrevocably real. I opened my eyes again, unable to look away, compelled by a primal fascination. The creature was even closer now, its face, or lack thereof, just feet from mine. No eyes, no nose, just a smooth, dark surface that seemed to absorb the light. But I could feel it watching me, dissecting me, studying me. A voice, not from the creature's silent form, but from everywhere and nowhere, echoed in my mind. A low, sibilant whisper that seemed to slither into my thoughts, freezing them. You are lost. The words were not English, yet I understood them. A horrifying, intuitive understanding. They seeped into my bones, a cold, undeniable truth. I was lost, more lost than I could ever have imagined. The creature's hand, a collection of bark-like digits and obsidian-sharp claws, slowly extended towards me. It didn't seem to be moving to strike, but to touch, to explore, to claim. The air around its fingers shimmered with an unnatural energy. I tried to scream again, but my throat was closed. I closed my eyes once more, bracing for whatever horror was about to unfold. My mind flashed to my small town, my friends, the warm fires, the hot cocoa. The life I had taken for granted, the world that felt so safe and predictable. It was a million miles away, a distant dream, utterly severed from this nightmare. A sudden, sharp crack rent the air, not from the creature, but from the trees behind it. The creature froze, its extended hand hovering inches from my face. Its featureless head snapped towards the sound. A flicker of light, a movement in the dense fog, and then a figure, small and quick, darted from behind a large oak. It was a person, a human, clad in dark, practical clothing, a hood pulled low over their head, obscuring their features. They moved with an incredible agility, a blur of motion. In their hand they held something, a short, thick piece of wood, gnarled and dark like a club or a staff. They swung it with surprising force, bringing it down in a swift, powerful arc. It struck the creature's arm, not with a solid thud, but with a sound like splintering wood and tearing fabric. The creature recoiled with a shuddering hiss, a sound that grated on my very soul. Its form seemed to ripple, to momentarily dissolve and then reform, its elongated arm twisting unnaturally. Black, viscous liquid, thick and oily, oozed from the point of impact. The figure didn't hesitate. They moved again, circling the creature, a small, determined silhouette against the oppressive gray. The creature, for all its immense size and terrifying power, seemed disoriented, caught off guard. It thrashed, its long limbs lashing out, tearing at the fog-shrouded air, splintering nearby branches. The figure dodged, weaving between the creature's flailing limbs with uncanny grace. They struck again, another sharp, precise blow to the creature's knee-like joint, causing another sickening crack. The creature let out a low, guttural shriek that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality, a sound that promised absolute, unimaginable pain. It was enough. The monster staggered, its form wavering, almost transparent for a moment. It took a single retreating step, then another, slowly backing away into the dense, swirling fog, its injured limb dragging. The growl returned, but it was weaker now, tinged with a raw, inhuman pain. In a matter of seconds, it had vanished, melting back into the shadows and the swirling mists, leaving behind only the chilling cold and the lingering scent of ozone and decay. The figure stood still for a moment, their breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. Then they slowly turned towards me. The hood was still low, but I could make out the faint glint of eyes beneath it, dark and intense. "Are you all right?" a voice, rough and low, yet distinctly feminine, asked. Her voice was steady, despite the obvious exertion. I tried to answer, but my voice was a broken croak. I could only manage a nod, clutching my injured arm, my head throbbing with a dull ache. The adrenaline was slowly receding, leaving me weak and trembling. She knelt beside me, her movements efficient and practiced. I could feel her presence, calm and focused, a stark contrast to the primal terror that still gripped me. Her hands, though gloved, were gentle as she examined my arm. "It's dislocated, I think," she said, her voice matter of fact. "And you have a nasty gash on your head. Can you tell me your name?" Noah," I stammered, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. "Noah Grant." "Noah," she repeated, almost to herself. She paused, then with a swift, expert motion, she popped my shoulder back into place. A scream tore from my throat, raw and involuntary, quickly suppressed as she held me steady. The relief, though, was immediate, a rush of dulling pain replacing the sharp, agonizing throb. "Sorry," she said without an ounce of remorse. "Had to be done. Can you stand?" I gritted my teeth, pushing back the wave of nausea. I think so." "Good," she said, reaching for my uninjured arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "We need to move. It won't stay away for long." What was that?" I whispered, looking back at the spot where the creature had vanished, a cold dread still clinging to me. She didn't answer, her gaze fixed on the shifting fog, her body tense, alert. "We have to go now." I stumbled to my feet, leaning heavily on her. My head swam and my vision was still blurry, but the immediate threat of the creature spurred me on. She led me away from the clearing, not back the way I came, but deeper into the woods, into an even denser thicket that seemed to defy navigation. She moved with an innate knowledge of the forest, her steps sure and silent, even through the treacherous terrain. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice still hoarse. She glanced at me over her shoulder, her dark eyes unreadable beneath the hood. "Just a traveler, like you. Now keep moving, stay close." She didn't offer more, and I was too dazed, too terrified to press her. The pain in my head and arm, the lingering horror of what I had seen, dulled my curiosity. All I could do was follow, trusting this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere to save me from an impossible monster. We walked for what felt like an eternity, though it could have been minutes. The fog remained thick, obscuring everything, making the forest a shifting, claustrophobic maze. I lost all sense of direction, all track of time. My guide, however, seemed to know exactly where she was going, weaving through the trees, ducking under low branches, her movements fluid and purposeful. The air remained heavy, but the oppressive cold seemed to lessen slightly. The pervasive scent of decay also began to recede, replaced by the cleaner, sharper smell of pine. I clung to her side, relying entirely on her for guidance, my body aching, my mind still reeling. Finally, after what felt like an impossible journey through an endless labyrinth of trees and mist, she stopped. We were in a small clearing, sheltered by a ring of ancient, towering spruces. In the center, almost invisible until she pointed it out, was a small, roughly constructed shelter, no more than a lean-to made of branches and tarps. A faint wisp of smoke curled from a small, stone-ringed fire pit in front of it. "We're safe here for now," she said, her voice a little softer now that the immediate danger had passed. "Come, you need to rest, and I need to tend to that head wound." I collapsed onto the ground near the fire, too exhausted to protest, too grateful to question. The warmth of the small fire was a welcome relief from the pervasive chill, chasing away some of the cold that had settled deep in my bones. I watched, mesmerized, as she moved around the lean-to, pulling out a small medical kit, a water skin, and a pouch of dried herbs. She was small, slender, but wiry, with an underlying strength that belied her frame. Her face, now partially visible in the flickering firelight, was sharp-featured, framed by dark, braided hair that escaped her hood. Her eyes, when she met mine, were an intense, piercing gray, ancient and wise, as if they had seen far too much. There were faint scars, like old scratches, on her exposed cheekbones, barely visible in the dim light. "Drink this," she said, handing me the water skin. The water was cool and refreshing, washing away the metallic taste in my mouth. She then took a piece of clean cloth, dabbed it with some clear liquid from a small bottle, and gently began to clean the gash on my forehead. It stung, but the pain was a welcome anchor in the swirling chaos of my mind. "Thank you," I managed, my voice still weak, for saving me." She nodded, her expression grim. "You were lucky. Few escape the Shadow Walker once it has marked them." "Shadow Walker," I repeated, the name sending a fresh shiver down my spine. "Is that what it was?" "One of many names," she replied, her voice low. "An ancient forest spirit, a protector and a hunter. It senses trespassers, those who defile its domain, and it feeds on their fear." I felt a cold wave wash over me. I didn't mean to trespass. I was on the Blackwood Ridge Trail. I've hiked it hundreds of times. She looked at me, her gray eyes piercing. "These woods, they have changed. Shifted, not on the maps you carry. The old ways are returning. The veil between worlds thins here, especially in these parts this deep in the mountains." "Veil between worlds," I scoffed, a nervous, disbelieving laugh escaping me. Even after what I had just seen, my rational mind struggled to accept it. She didn't laugh, her expression remained serious, almost pitying. "You saw it, Noah, you felt it. Do you still believe your old maps, your old world?" The question hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I looked at the small fire, its flames dancing, the only source of light and warmth in this impossibly dark and hostile forest. My old world felt like a flimsy illusion, shattered by the horrific reality of the Shadow Walker and the shifting, malevolent woods. "No," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "No, I don't." She nodded slowly, as if confirming a long-held truth. "Good, that is the first step, acceptance." She finished bandaging my head, her touch gentle but firm. "You'll need to rest. You've lost blood and your body is in shock." She handed me a small piece of dried jerky and a handful of berries. "Eat. It's not much, but it will give you strength." I ate ravenously, the food tasting surprisingly good, a burst of energy to my depleted body. As I ate, she tended to the fire, adding small pieces of wood, carefully nurturing the flames. Her movements were quiet, deliberate, every action imbued with a sense of purpose. "What now?" I asked, looking at her. "How do I get out of here, back to my world?" She paused, her back to me, silhouetted against the firelight. "That is not a simple question, Noah. Getting out. It will be difficult. The shadow walker will remember you, and it may not be the only thing out here." "There are others?" I asked, my blood running cold again. She turned, her eyes narrowed. "These woods are ancient. They hold many secrets and many denizens, some indifferent, some curious, some hungry." "But you fought it off," I said, remembering her swift, precise strikes. "You know how." "I know a way," she corrected, holding up the gnarled wooden staff she had used earlier. It looked like a piece of deadwood, but there was an intricate carving at its tip, a spiral pattern that seemed to shimmer faintly in the firelight. "This staff, it is imbued with old magic. It repels them, but it cannot destroy them, not fully." "Magic," I whispered, my mind struggling to keep up with the cascading impossibilities. She gave a small, weary smile. "Yes, Noah, magic, the old magic, the kind your world forgot." She looked at the staff, a distant, almost mournful look in her eyes. "It comes at a cost, though. Every use drains a part of me." I suddenly felt a profound sense of shame. I had been so arrogant, so convinced of my own understanding of the world. Now here I was, a helpless child, rescued by a mysterious woman wielding magic against a creature of shadow. "So what do we do?" I asked, the desperation clear in my voice. "Do we just wait here?" She shook her head. "No, we rest tonight, and tomorrow we move. We must find a way back to the thinning point where the veil is weak enough to cross without too much danger. It's not far from here, but it's not a direct path. We have to be careful." "The thinning point." "A place where the old world and your world brush closest," she explained. "A point of passage. Not everyone can find it, and not everyone can use it." "Can I?" I asked, my hope a fragile, flickering flame. She studied me, her gaze lingering on my face, then my hands. "You found this place, didn't you? You didn't just stumble here. You were drawn. The woods chose you, in a way." My mind replayed the subtle shifts, the prickling sensation, the odd turn in the trail. It hadn't been an accident. It had been an invitation, or a trap. "What do you mean, the woods chose me?" "Some people, they are more attuned to the echoes of the old world," she explained, her voice quiet. "They feel the pull even if they don't understand it. You, Noah, you felt the trail shift. You didn't dismiss it as just a wrong turn. You felt the wrongness. That is a sign." "A sign of what?" She looked at me, a cryptic smile playing on her lips. "That you are not entirely of your world, Noah. That a part of you belongs to this one." The thought sent a chill through me, even as the fire warmed my face. A part of me belonged here, in this place of ancient horrors and forgotten magic. It was a terrifying, yet strangely compelling idea. She settled down opposite me by the fire, her staff resting beside her. "Sleep now, we will talk more." I tried to sleep, but it was impossible. Every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl sent jolts of fear through me. My mind replayed the image of the shadow walker, its featureless face, its impossibly long, clawed fingers. Then the woman, a blur of motion, swinging her staff, the crack of wood, and the creature's unearthly shriek. It was too much, too bizarre, too terrifying. I watched her instead. She sat cross-legged by the fire, her back straight, her hood still partially obscuring her face. Her gray eyes, though, were open, staring into the flames, unblinking. She seemed to be listening, not to the forest sounds, but to something beyond them. Her stillness was absolute, a profound sense of peace that somehow coexisted with the intense alertness I had seen in her during the attack. As the hours dragged on, the fire slowly dwindled. The darkness deepened, becoming almost absolute beyond the small circle of light. I shivered, not just from the cold that crept back into the air, but from the chilling realization that my world, my understanding of reality, was utterly, irrevocably broken. Eventually, exhausted beyond measure, my body finally betrayed my racing mind. I drifted into a fitful, shallow sleep filled with fragmented images, splintered eyes, ancient stones, the silent, watching trees, and the shifting, formless terror of the shadow walker. I awoke with a start, my heart hammering. The fire was almost out, just glowing embers. The fog had thinned considerably, and a pale, pre-dawn light filtered through the canopy. The air was crisp, bitingly cold, but smelled cleaner, of damp earth and pine. The cloying scent of decay was gone. My head throbbed, a dull ache beneath the bandage. My arm, though painful, felt stable. The woman was no longer by the fire. I sat up, my gaze darting around the clearing. She was at the edge of the trees, her back to me, facing east. She stood perfectly still, her hood down now, revealing her dark, braided hair. She held her staff upright, its carved tip pointing towards the barely visible horizon. She seemed to be breathing deeply, slowly, as if drawing something from the waking forest. I pushed myself to my feet, wincing as my shoulder protested. "Hello," I called out, my voice raspy. She turned, her movements fluid and silent. Her face, sharp and serious, was illuminated by the gray light. Her eyes, those piercing gray eyes, met mine. They held an ancient sadness, but also an unwavering resolve. "Good morning, Noah Grant," she said, her voice soft. "Rest well." I managed a wry, humorless smile. Define well, more like haunted. "Who are you anyway? You never told me your name." She hesitated for a moment, then with a small, almost imperceptible sigh, she replied, "My name is Alara." "Alara," I repeated. It sounded as old and natural as the woods around us. "Thank you, Alara, for everything." She gave a brief nod. "We have little time for pleasantries. The sun will rise fully soon, and with it, the forest awakens. We need to move." She walked over to the lean-to and began to systematically pack her small camp. Everything she owned seemed to fit into a compact, leather-bound satchel. Her efficiency was remarkable, every item having its place, every movement economical. "What about my gear?" I asked, looking at my own battered day pack, which she must have retrieved from where I fell. She glanced at it. "Your phone is useless. The map is useless here. The multi-tool might be of some minor use for survival, but not against what we might face. Take the water, any remaining food, leave the rest. It will only slow us down." My rational mind protested, but then I remembered the shadow walker, the shifting woods. What use was a compass when North itself had been rewritten? What use was a map that depicted a world that no longer existed? I stripped my pack of the essentials, water bottle, the last energy bar, the first aid kit, and slung the small satchel containing them over my good shoulder. It felt strangely liberating to shed the weight of my old world, my old assumptions. "What's the plan?" I asked as she finished packing, her staff now clipped securely to her side. We follow the ancient paths, Alara said, gesturing vaguely into the deepening woods. The ones not found on your maps. These paths lead to places where the veil between worlds is thinnest. We seek a passage. And the shadow walker, I asked, a fresh wave of anxiety washing over me. It will hunt you, Noah, she stated plainly. It tasted your fear, it marked you, but the deep woods are vast and it is not omniscient. We will be swift and we will be silent, and we will use the forest's own secrets against it. Her words offered little comfort, but her calm demeanor was infectious. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. What secrets? Ilara turned, her eyes sweeping over the trees. The forest is alive, Noah, not just with animals, but with spirits, with ancient energies. Some are neutral, some benevolent, some malevolent. The shadow walker is one of the malevolent, but there are others older that it does not entirely control. We will seek their protection, or at least their indifference. Protection from forest spirits. I couldn't help but sound skeptical despite everything. She merely raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something almost amused in her eyes. You have seen what you have seen. Does a little more unreality bother you so much? I had no answer for that. As the sun began to peek over the distant peaks, casting long, golden shafts of light through the trees, Alara led the way. She moved differently than any hiker I had ever seen. She didn't follow obvious paths. Instead, she weaved through the undergrowth, her steps light and deliberate, almost dancing between obstacles. She seemed to know where every root lay, where every branch would snap. She read the subtle signs of the forest, the twist of a vine, the direction of moss growth, the way the light fell through certain clearings. I, a supposed expert woodsman, struggled to keep up. My injured arm ached, my head throbbed, and my conventional understanding of navigation was useless. I relied entirely on her, placing my feet precisely where she had placed hers, mimicking her cautious silence. The forest itself seemed to respond to her. Birds, which had been silent when I was alone, now chirped softly, almost conversationally, as she passed. Small animals like squirrels and rabbits would pause, watch her for a moment, then continue their business unafraid. It was as if she was a part of the woods rather than a visitor. We walked for hours, the terrain gradually changing. The trees grew taller, older, their branches draped with thick, shaggy moss. The ground underfoot was softer, covered in a deep layer of decaying leaves and needles. The air grew colder in these deeper sections, and the light, even though it was mid-morning, remained muted, filtered through the dense canopy. Ilara paused occasionally, placing her hand on a particularly ancient tree trunk, her eyes closed as if listening. At one point, she stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. I froze behind her, my heart pounding. "Listen," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I strained my ears. At first, I heard nothing but the gentle creaking of the trees. Then, a faint sound like distant bells, soft and ethereal, seemed to drift through the air. It wasn't metal, but something akin to wind chimes made of glass, incredibly delicate, yet resonating with an otherworldly purity. "What is that?" I whispered back. "The song of the whispering spruces," Alara replied, her voice filled with a reverence I hadn't heard before. "Ancient guardians, they sing when something is amiss or when passage is sought." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" She smiled faintly. "It simply is. It means we are close to where the veil thins, and it also means our presence is known." The bells faded after a few moments, leaving behind a silence that felt different from the oppressive quiet of the ravine. This silence was watchful, expectant. We continued, Alara leading us towards the sound's origin. The trees here were truly immense, their trunks so wide I couldn't have put my arms around them. Their branches, like massive limbs, reached towards each other, forming a cathedral-like canopy. Patches of luminescent moss glowed faintly on the forest floor, casting a soft, ethereal light. It felt like stepping into a forgotten dream. Then we reached a clearing. It wasn't large, perhaps 30 feet across, but it was utterly breathtaking. In its center stood a single, colossal spruce tree, easily twice the height of the others, its bark almost black, its needles a deep, vibrant green. Its branches stretched out like arms, sheltering the entire clearing. And beneath its branches, scattered around its base, were dozens of small, clear crystals, some no bigger than my thumb, others the size of my fist. It was these crystals, catching the faint light, that created the bell-like sounds, vibrating with some unseen energy. "The heartwood spruce," Alara whispered, her voice hushed. "One of the oldest trees in these woods. It holds great power." I stared, mesmerized. The air here felt clean, vibrant, almost electric. A sense of profound peace settled over me, pushing back the fear and the pain. I felt a connection to this place, a deep, resonant hum within my own bones, as if I had found a part of myself I never knew was missing. "Is this the thinning point?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Alara shook her head. "No, this is a place of sanctuary, a place where the woods themselves are strong. The veil is thickest here, not thinnest, but we need its blessing, or at least its tolerance, for what comes next." She approached the heartwood spruce, her movements slow and deliberate. She knelt at its base, placing her staff on the ground beside her. Then she reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bowl. She filled it with water from her skin, then added a pinch of dried herbs and a few small, iridescent pebbles. She held the bowl out, offering it to the tree, her head bowed in reverence. She began to chant, a low, melodic murmur in a language I didn't recognize, but which felt ancient and powerful. I watched, feeling like an intruder. My rational mind screamed that this was nonsense, superstition, but my eyes had seen a shadow walker and my body had felt its power. What was a little spirit offering in the face of that? As she chanted, a faint shimmering began to emanate from the crystals around the tree. The bell-like sounds returned, growing louder, swirling around us, creating a dome of sound and light. The air grew warm, then cool, then warm again, as if breathing. I felt a strange energy, like a gentle current, flow over me, through me. It wasn't threatening, but probing, curious. Alara finished her chant, slowly standing. She poured the water mixture onto the roots of the tree, then retrieved her staff. The shimmering faded, the bells quieted, but the sense of vibrant energy remained. She turned to me, her eyes bright. "The heartwood accepts our plea. We have its blessing for safe passage through its domain, but we must still be wary." "What did you just do?" I asked, utterly bewildered. "I asked for permission," she explained simply. "We are guests here. We do not take without asking, or we pay a price." She paused, then added, "It also hides our scent, our presence, from the shadow walker for a time, a temporary shield." This was a level of immersion in the old world I was completely unprepared for. I had hiked in these woods for decades, thinking I knew them, when in reality I had barely scratched the surface of their true nature. "So where to now?" I asked, feeling a renewed sense of purpose, spurred by the heartwood's strange energy. North, Ilara said, pointing to a barely perceptible track leading out of the clearing, deeper into the untouched wilderness. To the Whispering Falls, that is where the veil thins. The journey to the Whispering Falls was different from our earlier frantic escape. It was slower, more deliberate, a careful dance through an ancient living labyrinth. Ilara navigated with an instinct that defied logic, guiding us through thickets that seemed impassable, over treacherous rockfalls, and across icy streams without once consulting a map or even hesitating. The forest changed around us, reflecting the strangeness of our path. We passed through groves of trees whose leaves were perpetually autumn-hued, even in what I knew was late autumn anyway. Their colors, though, were richer, more vibrant than any I'd ever seen, impossibly deep reds, glowing oranges, and golds that shimmered with an inner light. We saw flowers blooming, vibrant and exotic, in shades of purple and blue that shouldn't have been possible this time of year. At one point, we came across a small, clear pool, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the ancient trees like a mirror. Ilara stopped, pointing. "The wellspring of lost memories," she murmured. "It shows you what you have forgotten or what you fear to remember." I peered into its depths, a strange compulsion urging me closer. For a moment I saw my own reflection, my face pale and bruised, but then it shifted. The image of my childhood home, bathed in a warm, impossibly bright summer sun, flickered into view. My parents younger laughing, a dog I'd had as a boy long since passed. The everyday world, so mundane just days ago, now seemed infinitely precious, a vibrant tapestry I feared was slipping away. A wave of profound sadness washed over me. "Do not linger too long," Ilara's voice broke through my reverie. "It can ensnare you." I pulled back, shaking my head to clear the images. "It felt so real," I murmured. "This world is real, Noah," she corrected gently. "And it mirrors yours, distorts it, or sometimes simply shows what lies beneath the surface of things." As we moved deeper, the air grew noticeably colder again, and a fine mist began to gather, not the suffocating fog of the ravine, but a gentle, swirling haze that softened the edges of everything. We heard the distant roar of water long before we saw it, a deep, resonant rumble that grew steadily louder, promising raw power. Ilara became more cautious, her movements more guarded. She drew her staff, holding it loosely in one hand. "We are close," she said, her voice low. "The thinning point, but with the thinnest veil comes the greatest danger. Things can slip through from either side." My heart hammered again. The shadow walker was a thing of this side, a denizen of the shifting woods. What could slip through from my side that would be a threat here, or from some other, even darker place? We finally emerged from a dense copse of ancient firs into a narrow canyon. Before us, the landscape opened up dramatically. A massive waterfall, hundreds of feet high, thundered down a sheer rock face, crashing into a churning pool below. The spray filled the air, creating a permanent, swirling mist that glittered with faint, rainbow hues in the filtered light. This was the Whispering Falls. But it wasn't just a waterfall. The canyon walls themselves were covered in carvings, ancient pictographs that defied any human culture I knew. Swirling patterns, geometric shapes, and everywhere the jagged, splintered eye symbol repeated endlessly, integrated into the greater tapestry. And beneath the thundering roar of the falls, I could almost hear the whispering, a thousand subtle echoes of sound, a constant murmur that seemed to speak in a language just beyond my comprehension. At the very base of the falls, where the water churned into a maelstrom, was a single, immense stone archway, naturally carved by erosion, yet somehow seeming too perfect, too symmetrical. It wasn't natural. It was a gateway, and the air around it shimmered, visibly distorted, like heat rising from pavement on a summer day. "That's it," Alara said, her voice tight with tension. "The thinning point." "How do we cross?" I asked, feeling a mix of dread and desperate hope. "We walk through it," she replied, "but it is not as simple as it sounds. The crossing is disorienting. It tries to hold you. It tries to show you your fears, your regrets. You must resist. You must focus on your desire to return." As we approached the archway, the temperature plummeted again. The air grew heavy, almost viscous, making it hard to breathe. The whispering sounds intensified, forming a chaotic chorus of indistinct voices swirling around my head, pressing in on my thoughts. I felt an immense pressure, as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched and pulled. Suddenly, Alara grabbed my uninjured arm, her grip iron-hard. Her eyes were fixed on the archway, her jaw tight. "Stay focused, Noah. Keep your mind clear. Do not let it take you." Just as we were about to step through the shimmering gateway, a low growl, deep and chilling, reverberated through the canyon. It was familiar, too familiar. "The Shadow Walker." Alara cursed under her breath. "It found us." It felt the thinning point. From the shadows of the canyon walls, where the mist clung thickest, a form began to coalesce. Tall, gaunt, impossibly black, its twisted, bark-like limbs unfolded, its featureless head turning towards us. Its presence brought with it an immediate, suffocating cold, a wave of pure malevolence that made my blood run to ice. "Go, Noah, go through." Alara shoved me towards the archway. "I'll hold it off." "No," I cried, fear and a sudden, fierce loyalty battling within me. "I won't leave you." "Don't be a fool," she snapped, her eyes blazing. "This is your only chance. It wants you. It tasted your fear. Get out." The Shadow Walker took a step forward, its growl deepening, vibrating through the stone under our feet. Its long, clawed hand, shimmering with black energy, began to reach out. Alara moved. With a guttural cry, she raised her staff, its carved tip glowing with a faint, silvery light. She lunged forward, placing herself between me and the creature, her small form a defiant shield. The staff connected with the Shadow Walker's outstretched arm with a blinding flash of light and a sound like thunder. The creature shrieked, a tearing, impossible sound that echoed through the canyon. Its form wavered, parts of it seeming to dissolve into smoke before reforming. Black liquid oozed from the point of impact, but it didn't retreat. It roared, a guttural sound of pure rage, and lunged. "Now, Noah, now!" Alara screamed, barely deflecting a massive blow from the creature's other arm. The impact sent her stumbling, but she held her ground, her staff a shimmering barrier. I hesitated for only a second. The image of her struggling against the impossible monster burned into my mind. But her words, "It wants you," echoed. My presence was a target, a distraction. If I stayed, I would only hinder her. With a desperate cry, I turned and plunged into the shimmering archway. The world exploded into chaos. It wasn't like walking through a door. It was like falling, tumbling through an endless void of fractured light and sound. My senses were overwhelmed. I felt pulls and tugs from every direction, as if invisible hands were trying to tear me apart, to hold me back. My mind was bombarded with images, flashes of my past, my future, fears, regrets, moments of joy, all flickering past at impossible speed. The whispering voices intensified, becoming a deafening chorus, speaking directly into my mind. telling me I was lost, that I belonged here, that my world was a lie. You are ours, you cannot escape. This is your home now. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching my head, trying to block out the assault. The pain in my arm and head flared, but it was nothing compared to the psychic assault. I felt a cold dread, a profound loneliness, the sensation of being utterly severed from everything I knew. Then through the cacophony, a single thought broke through, clear and insistent. Alara, her face, stern but resolute, flashed in my mind, her bravery, her sacrifice. I owed her. I had to get back. I had to warn people. My world, I clung to the image of my small town, the warmth of my fireplace, the scent of pine needles on a safe, familiar trail. I focused on the feeling of solid ground, of clear, rational thought. I pushed back against the whispers, against the seductive lure of despair. I am Noah Grant. I am going home. With that defiance, a sudden, sharp crack echoed through the void. The whispers shrieked, a sound of frustrated rage. The images blurred, then shattered. The pulling sensation intensified, almost tearing me apart, then released. I landed hard on solid ground, sprawling onto damp earth. The cold hit me first, a sharp, bracing chill. Then the silence, not the oppressive silence of the other side, but the natural, peaceful quiet of my familiar woods, punctuated by the distant calls of birds. I pushed myself up, groaning. My head throbbed, my shoulder screamed, and my entire body ached as if I'd been run over by a truck. I was disoriented, dizzy, but undeniably here. I looked around. I was in a small, unremarkable clearing, surrounded by familiar-looking pines and oaks. The path I was on was a narrow game trail, but it felt solid, real, the kind of trail I'd walked 1,000 times. The sun, though still low, was brighter, clearer, filtering through the branches in golden shafts. There was no fog, no ancient gnarled maples pressing in, no shimmering archway, no roar of the whispering falls. It was over. I was back. A wave of dizzying relief, so profound it brought tears to my eyes, washed over me. I sank to my knees, shaking, just breathing in the crisp, familiar air. I felt the rough bark of a normal tree against my cheek, smelled the ordinary scent of pine and damp earth. It was real. I was back. But the relief was quickly tempered by a searing guilt. Alara, I had left her, standing alone against that creature. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. She had saved me, and I had abandoned her. I pulled out my phone, a desperate, irrational gesture. No service still, but the screen wasn't cracked. It glowed, displaying the correct time and date. My GPS app, though slow, was acquiring satellites. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, a small blue dot appeared on the screen, centered on a familiar network of lines. It was a section of the Blackwood Ridge Trail. My heart leaped. I was on the outskirts of the official trail system, about 3 miles from the trailhead. It was almost too easy. After everything, after the terror, the impossible journey, the confrontation, I had just popped back into my world, right where I was supposed to be, albeit a little off course. I stumbled to my feet, my legs still shaky. I had to go back. I had to find Alara. But how? The archway was gone, the thinning point. This was my world. That was something else. Panic, cold and sharp, began to creep in again. What if I couldn't find the archway again? What if she was gone? What if the shadow walker? I forced myself to breathe, one step at a time, get to the trailhead, get help, then figure out how to go back if I even could. I started walking, forcing my injured body forward, following the faint game trail in the direction my GPS indicated was southeast, towards the trailhead. Every step was painful, but the thought of Alara, alone in that other, terrifying place, spurred me on. The walk was a blur of pain and adrenaline. My body moved on instinct, pushing through the familiar terrain. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only an hour, I heard the faint, distant sound of a car. A real car, my world. I broke into a stumbling run, bursting out of the tree line and onto the gravel path leading to the trailhead parking lot. My car was still there, the only one, just as I had left it. I collapsed against the side of my SUV, gasping for breath, my body shaking uncontrollably. I fumbled for my keys, my hands trembling so badly I could barely unlock the door. I practically fell into the driver's seat, pulling the door shut with a weak thud. The interior of my car, the mundane familiarity of it, felt like a miracle. The smell of old coffee and worn upholstery. The radio still tuned to the local country station. My water bottle in the cup holder. It was all there, untouched, as if I had only been gone for a routine hike. But I wasn't untouched. My clothes were torn, caked with mud and dried blood. My head throbbed and my shoulder screamed. And etched into my very soul was the memory of a shifting forest, a skeletal creature, and a brave, mysterious woman. I managed to start the engine, the familiar rumble of the SUV, a profound comfort. I put the car in reverse, backing out of the empty parking lot. My hands were still shaking, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I knew I couldn't just drive away. Not yet. I pulled over just outside the parking lot where the forest thinned, but I could still see the trailhead. I needed a moment to breathe, to think, to process. I pulled out my phone again, still no service, but the local emergency number was stored. I could call the park rangers, tell them what? That I got lost and saw a monster made of bark and a woman with magic saved me. They'd think I was crazy or on drugs. They'd send me to a psychiatric ward, not back into the woods. No, I couldn't tell them everything, not yet. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Alara, what could I do? How could I find her again? I had no idea where the thinning point was, how to access it, or if it would even be there if I tried to go back. I got out of the car, ignoring the pain. I walked back towards the trailhead, my eyes scanning the familiar woods. It looked normal, peaceful, the same woods I'd known my entire life. But I knew better now. I knew the surface was a lie. I walked to the entrance of the Blackwood Ridge Trail, the point where I had first noticed the subtle shift. It looked perfectly normal now, a well-worn path leading into ordinary trees. No gnarled maples leaning in, no muddy, soft ground, just dry leaves and packed earth. I knelt, touching the soil. It was firm, familiar, my old world. It had absorbed me back, seamlessly, silently, as if nothing had ever happened. A fresh wave of terror hit me. What if it hadn't happened? What if it was all a delusion, a fever dream brought on by dehydration and a concussion? My head wound, my dislocated shoulder, the torn clothes. Those were real. But could the mind invent such vivid, terrifying things to explain a simple fall and getting lost? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to differentiate reality from nightmare. The crushing presence of the shadow walker, the sound of Alara's staff hitting it, the specific, unique details of the other forest. No, it wasn't a dream. It couldn't have been. The terror was too real. The sense of profound, ancient wrongness. But how to prove it? How to explain it? I stood there for a long time, caught between two worlds, two realities. The comfortable, rational world I had always known, and the terrifying, magical one I had just glimpsed. Finally, with a heavy heart, I returned to my car. I couldn't go back in there now, not alone, not without a plan, and certainly not without understanding more. I was injured, exhausted, and completely out of my depth. I started the car again and slowly, carefully began the drive back to town. The familiar winding road, the distant peaks, the scattered cabins along the way, they all felt alien, viewed through a new, terrifying lens. Every shadow in the woods seemed to hold a secret. Every rustle of leaves was a potential threat. As I drove, I tried to replay every detail of my encounter with Alara. Her words about the veil between worlds, the thinning points, the ancient paths, the old magic. Her calm conviction, her bravery. Her warning that the Shadow Walker would hunt me. I made it back to my small cabin, pulled into the driveway, and shut off the engine. The silence of my own home felt deafening. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My face was pale, streaked with dirt and blood. My eyes, wide and haunted, stared back at me. I barely recognized the man looking back. I stumbled inside, the familiar warmth of my cabin a stark contrast to the bone-deep chill I still felt. I dropped my small satchel on the floor. The few items I had kept from the other world, my water bottle, the energy bar, the first aid kit, suddenly feeling like precious relics from a forgotten expedition. I limped to the bathroom, catching my reflection in the mirror. The gash on my forehead was ugly, crusted with dried blood, but Alara's bandage was still firmly in place. My shoulder throbbed, but it was set. She had saved me and given me some measure of healing. I showered, letting the hot water wash away the dirt and grime, but not the terror. As the water ran over my skin, I felt a strange, tingling sensation, like static electricity, still clinging to me. It was a faint echo of the energy I had felt in the Heartwood spruce clearing, or perhaps a lingering residue from the other side. After tending to my wounds, I changed into clean clothes, but I couldn't rest. My mind was racing, trying to put the pieces together. I knew I couldn't tell anyone what had truly happened. Not my friends, not the authorities. They wouldn't believe me. They'd think I'd lost my mind. But I couldn't do nothing. Alara was still out there, in that terrifying, shifted forest, and she had saved my life. I owed her. More than that, I felt a deep, unsettling connection to her and to that other world. Her words, "A part of you belongs to this one," echoed in my mind. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, trying to find answers, trying to make sense of the impossible. I scoured old books on local folklore, obscure wilderness survival guides, anything that might shed light on what I had experienced. Nothing. Not a single mention of a shadow walker or thinning points or old magic in the Blackwood Ridge area. It was as if my entire experience had been erased from conventional knowledge. The more I searched, the more frustrated I became. My old world offered no explanations, no frame of reference. It simply denied the existence of what I had seen. As night fell, a new kind of fear settled over me. What if the Shadow Walker wasn't confined to the other side of the veil? What if it could find a way through? Alara had said it would hunt me. The thought sent chills down my spine. I locked my doors, checked my windows, a futile gesture against a creature that could dissolve into shadows. I couldn't sleep that night. I paced, I stared out the window into the familiar darkness of my own woods, but now they felt menacing, watchful. I felt a profound sense of isolation. I was alone with this impossible knowledge, alone with the memory of the horrors I had faced. By morning, a desperate resolve had solidified within me. I couldn't just move on. I couldn't just pretend it hadn't happened. I had to go back. I had to find Allura, and I had to understand what was happening to these woods. But I couldn't go back blindly. Not again. I needed a plan. I needed to learn. Ilara had used ancient knowledge, a kind of magic. If I was to return, I needed something similar. My multi-tool and first aid kit, those symbols of my old, rational world, were utterly useless against a shadow walker. I thought about Ilara's staff, the intricate carving, the faint shimmer, the way she had used it with confidence and knowledge. I needed to find similar knowledge, similar tools. I started by looking at the very symbol that had haunted me, the jagged, splintered eye. It had been on the crude marker on the cairn, carved into the megaliths. It was the mark of that other world. I pulled out a pad of paper and sketched it, trying to remember every detail. Then I looked at maps. Not the modern hiking maps, but old topographical maps of the region, some dating back a century or more, archived in the local library. I needed to look for anomalies, for places that were marked differently, for forgotten names. I spent the next few days immersing myself in dusty archives, poring over old texts, maps, and local historical records. My cabin, once a haven of quiet solitude, became a cluttered war room. Books lay open on every surface, topographical maps dating back to the late 1800s were pinned to the walls, and my laptop hummed ceaselessly, displaying endless search results for ancient forest spirits, thinning veils, and magical staffs. The rational mind, the woodsman's mind that had been my guide for so long, struggled valiantly against the torrent of impossibility. I'd find myself scoffing at an old legend about a tree shaper or a whispering guardian, only to have the image of the shadow walker's featureless face flash into my mind, silencing my skepticism instantly. Ilara's words, "You saw it, Noah, you felt it. Do you still believe your old maps, your old world?" hammered at me constantly. The answer was still no. My old world was a shattered illusion. My physical wounds slowly healed. The gash on my forehead scabbed over, and the ache in my shoulder lessened with each passing day. But the deeper wounds, the ones etched into my soul, remained. The chilling cold of the shadow walker's presence, the memory of its guttural shriek, the terrifying beauty of the heartwood spruce, and the chaotic assault of the thinning point, they played on an endless loop in my mind. Sleep was a luxury I rarely enjoyed, often punctuated by nightmares that blurred the lines between my safe cabin and the terrifying other side. The most persistent image, however, was Ilara. Her resolute face, her unwavering courage, the way she had stood between me and the creature. I had left her. The guilt was a heavy stone in my stomach, a constant reminder of my cowardice, even if she had forced me to go. I had to go back, not just for her, but for myself. I couldn't live with this knowledge, this terror, and do nothing. My research became an obsession. I knew I couldn't just walk back into the woods and stumble into another thinning point. I needed to understand. I needed knowledge like Ilara's. My focus narrowed to a few key areas: the jagged, splintered eye symbol, the old maps, and any mention of unusual natural phenomena in the region that might hint at Ilara's veil between worlds. The splintered eye. It had been on the makeshift marker at the edge of the altered trail, carved into the mysterious cairn and endlessly repeated on the canyon walls of the Whispering Falls. It was the signature of that other world, a symbol of its presence. I sketched it over and over, trying to imbue it with meaning, to unlock its secrets. Its jagged lines spoke of division, of rupture, perhaps of the veil itself. Its central pupil seemed to pierce through, watching. I spent hours at the local library, a small, unassuming building nestled in the heart of town. Mrs. Gable, the librarian, a kindly woman with spectacles perched on her nose, gave me odd looks. "More hiking guides, Noah? You look like you've seen a ghost." She chuckled. I offered a weak smile. "Just some new trails, Mrs. Gable, trying to branch out." The irony was painful. But I wasn't looking at hiking guides. I was in the dusty local history section, then the folklore and mythology section, even geology. I devoured forgotten county histories, obscure personal journals of early settlers, and even collections of Native American legends, hoping to find a fragment of truth. Most of it was dismissed as quaint superstition or attributed to early settlers' fear of the wilderness. But every now and then, a phrase would leap out at me, sending a shiver down my spine. An account from 1888 mentioned the woods shifting and a tall man of bark and shadow. Another, from a trapper's journal in the 1920s, spoke of places where the air thickens and the trees look sideways, and warned of the eye-carved stones. There were references to lost trails, singing forests, and doorways in the mist. These fragments were rare, buried deep within pages of mundane accounts of farming and logging, but they were there. Enough to confirm that others, long ago, had glimpsed what I had seen, and they often mentioned a symbol, though never explicitly described, that was clearly the splintered eye. It was often associated with places of passage or sacred clearings. Then there were the maps. The old topographical maps were a revelation. They showed details that modern maps omitted. Small springs long since dried up, forgotten logging roads swallowed by regrowth, and occasionally curious designations like Spirit's Knoll or Whispering Rock. One particular map, hand-drawn and dated 1857, caught my eye. It depicted the Blackwood Ridge area, but with subtle differences. A small, unnamed ravine was marked with a curious, almost illegible squiggle. And deeper in the woods, where my modern maps showed only unbroken forest, this old map had a faint, penciled circle with a symbol that, even faded, I recognized. The splintered eye. And beside it, a name almost erased by time, Ayanani. Ayanani, the word sounded ancient, almost a hum on my tongue. Could it be a place name, a name for the thinning point? This map became my most prized possession. I carefully photographed it with my phone, zooming in on every detail. The splintered eye symbol on this old map seemed to be a key, pointing to specific locations, not just general areas. There were several such symbols scattered across the mountain range, always near natural features. A high peak, a deep ravine, a waterfall, a particularly ancient grove. My research continued online, but with more targeted keywords. Ancient mountain tribes of the Appalachians, forgotten trails with sacred markings. I stumbled upon a small online forum dedicated to obscure folklore and liminal spaces. Most of it was fringe theory and conspiracy, but one particular user, Forest Whisperer, consistently posted about thinning veils and places of crossing in various mountain ranges, including the Appalachians. Their posts were highly detailed, often referencing ancient languages and symbols, and there, repeatedly, was a simplified version of the splintered eye. I sent a private message to Forest Whisperer outlining my hypothetical experience, careful to omit anything that sounded too insane. I described the sensation of the woods shifting, the feeling of wrongness, the presence of the symbol. I even attached a photo of my sketch of the splintered eye. It took 2 days for a reply to come, and I practically snatched my phone out of my hand when it buzzed. Forest Whisperer, your description is uncannily accurate for a hypothetical. The symbol you sketched is indeed the veil splitter, known to some as the Eye of the Otherworld. It marks places where the boundaries between dimensions are weak. Your experience with shifting woods confirms you've crossed into what some call the Echo Lands or the Fey Wilds, though those are modern terms. The ancients knew it simply as the beyond. Few return unchanged, fewer still with their sanity intact, and even fewer return willingly. My hands trembled as I read the message. Validation. My heart leaped. Someone else knew, someone else believed. I quickly typed a reply, abandoning all pretense of hypothetical. I encountered a being there, tall, bark-like, made of shadow. It hunted me, and a woman, Alara, saved me. She fought it with a staff. She called it a shadow walker. She said she knew a way back through a thinning point, but I had to leave her. The reply came back almost immediately, sounding urgent. Forest Whisperer, a shadow walker, that is grave. They mark their prey, and a protector in old blood, that is rare indeed. You are incredibly fortunate. If you seek to return, know that it is exceedingly dangerous. The Echo Lands are not for the faint of heart or for the unprepared. The veil splitter symbol marks these passages, but they are not always stable, and some things can cross back through, especially if they have been marked by a living soul. My blood ran cold. Some things can cross back through. Ilara's warning, it will hunt you, Noah. My cabin, my locked doors, my normal world suddenly felt fragile, vulnerable. Noah Grant, I need to go back. She saved me. I can't leave her. How do I go back? How do I find the thinning point? How do I protect myself? Forest Whisperer, your intentions are noble if reckless. You carry a burden now. The Shadow Walker will indeed sense you. You need more than courage. You need ancient knowledge. I can guide you to some texts, some concepts, but direct passage. That requires a guide or a deep understanding of the ley lines and the weave of the land itself. Ayanani you mentioned, that is an old name for a primary thinning point, a nexus. Extremely powerful, extremely dangerous. And guarded. Noah Grant, guarded by what? Forest Whisperer, by ancient entities, some benevolent, some neutral, some fiercely territorial, and often by the Shadow Walkers themselves as they use such points to cross. Ayanani is a primary conduit. It would be heavily patrolled. The conversation continued for hours, stretching late into the night. Forest Whisperer, whose real name was eventually revealed as Lydia, was a trove of information. She explained that the Echo Lands were not a separate dimension, but rather a parallel aspect of our own world, a layer where ancient energies and entities resided, often overlapping with certain geographical locations. The veil was not a solid barrier, but a fluctuating membrane, thinning and thickening based on natural cycles, astrological alignments, and the presence of powerful magical ley lines. She spoke of the old blood, individuals like Alara who possessed an innate connection to these energies and could manipulate them, often through generations of inherited knowledge and practice. These people were rare, guardians of the old ways, often living on the fringes of society, protecting the thinning points or guiding lost souls. Lydia warned me about the Shadow Walkers. They are beings of pure shadow and fear, tied to the darkest corners of the Echo Lands. They thrive on the terror of mortals. Once one has marked you, it will pursue you relentlessly. They can't fully manifest in our world without extreme effort or a very thin veil, but they can project their influence, sow fear, create illusions, and even leave a lingering chill that drains your vitality. This explained the lingering cold, the heightened fear I felt even in my cabin. The Shadow Walker was still reaching for me, even across the veil. To combat them, Lydia explained, you need more than physical strength. You need focused will and specific tools. Ilara's staff was likely a heartwood rod, imbued with the essence of ancient trees, capable of disrupting the Shadow Walker's form. Iron, especially cold iron, can also cause them pain, but it's not a lasting deterrent. Light, pure light, can also weaken them, but not destroy them. Lydia couldn't tell me exactly where Ayanani was. Specific locations shift, the energies move, but the general area on your old map near the Whispering Falls is a known nexus. You'll need to follow the ley lines, the invisible currents of magic in the land. Only those with a connection or guided by a compass attuned to these energies can find them reliably. A compass attuned to energies, I asked, bewildered. Not a magnetic compass, Noah, she replied. More like a dowsing rod, but for spiritual currents. Very rare, very old. I felt a surge of despair. How was I, a modern man, supposed to acquire such things? I was a stranger in this new, terrifying reality. I need to learn, I told Lydia, everything. I need to know how to navigate this world, how to protect myself, how to find Alara and get her back. Lydia agreed to help, but her help came with a condition. You must understand the risks, Noah. You are stepping into a world far beyond your comprehension. There will be no turning back from this path. And you must promise me if you make it back, you will seek out others. The veil is thinning everywhere. The old world is encroaching. We need more people who understand. I agreed without hesitation. My old life, my old understanding was gone. This was my new reality. Over the next few weeks, my cabin transformed even further. My research expanded from library archives to online antique shops, obscure spiritual supply stores, and even blacksmiths who still worked with traditional methods. Lydia sent me lists of herbs, stones, and symbols. She described rituals of protection and attunement. She taught me about the concept of focused intent and spiritual shielding. I began practicing small, seemingly mundane things. Meditating in the deepest parts of my own woods, trying to sense the flow of energy, the breath of the trees. I learned to identify specific plants and their traditional uses, not just for survival, but for their energetic properties. I even started carrying a small piece of iron in my pocket, an old horseshoe nail that a local blacksmith had given me, just in case. One day, while exploring an abandoned logging trail near the Blackwood Ridge trailhead, far from where I had initially crossed, I felt it. A subtle shift in the air, a prickling sensation on my skin. The trees didn't twist, the ground didn't soften, but there was a distinct sense of otherness. I stopped, my heart pounding. Was it the Shadow Walker, or just a faint echo of the veil? I pulled out the old map, the one with the penciled Ayanani. I compared it to my GPS. The trail I was on was not on my modern map, but it was faintly drawn on the old one, leading towards a small, unnamed spring. And near that spring, marked with another faint splintered eye symbol, was the designation Sentinel Grove. Lydia's words echoed. The veil splitter symbol marks these passages, but they are not always stable, and some things can cross back through. My fear was tangible, but so was my resolve. I had to face this. I had to learn. I spent the next few days in the woods, not aimlessly hiking, but deliberately searching for these thinning spots, these subtle shifts. I found several. Faint patches of cold, strange scents, a momentary blurring of my vision. It was unsettling, like walking on thin ice. My preparations also became more practical. I started gathering my own tools. I found an old, sturdy hiking stick made of gnarled oak that felt surprisingly balanced in my hand. I began to carve the splintered eye into its tip meticulously with a small, sharp knife. Lydia had told me that focusing my intent, pouring my will into a symbol could give it power. It felt like a childish exercise at first, but as I carved, focusing on Alara, on my need to return, on my defiance of the Shadow Walker, I felt a strange energy, a warmth, flow into the wood. The carved lines seemed to deepen, to hold a faint, almost invisible shimmer. I also made sure my supplies were minimal but robust. A small, durable pack, a water purifier, high-energy food, a proper first aid kit with a focus on treating cuts, sprains, and potential exposure to strange energies as Lydia had advised, and a small, very sharp hunting knife made of cold steel, which Lydia assured me was good for cutting through some minor ephemeral resistances. One evening, as I was practicing a spiritual shielding exercise Lydia had taught me, visualizing a protective aura around myself, I felt it. A cold, insidious presence. Not the crushing terror of the Shadow Walker's full manifestation, but a subtle, creeping dread that settled over my cabin. The air grew still, unnaturally so, and a faint, acrid scent like ozone mixed with decay wafted through my open window. It was close. I froze, my heart thundering. I stood absolutely still, trying to pinpoint its location. It wasn't just outside. It felt like it was inside the walls, seeping through the very fabric of my home. Then a faint whispering sound, not in my ears, but directly in my mind. Lost, alone, ours, the same words I had heard at the thinning point. I clutched my carved staff, my knuckles white. My hand went for the cold iron knife on the table. My rational mind screamed, this was impossible. This was my cabin, my safe space. Fear, feed us. The whisper grew stronger, more insistent. I closed my eyes, trying to focus, to remember Lydia's teachings, focused intent, shielding. I visualized the protective aura around me, a warm, golden light pushing back the invading cold. It was difficult, the fear was overwhelming, but I forced myself. The cold intensified, a wave washing over me, making my teeth chatter. My cabin seemed to darken, shadows deepening in the corners, shifting, coalescing into vague, menacing forms. I gritted my teeth. Get out, I said, my voice barely a whisper but infused with a desperate defiance. You don't belong here. The whispers snarled, a sound of frustration. The shadows flickered, struggling against my shield. I could feel a draining sensation, like my energy was being siphoned away, but I pushed back, drawing on the anger, the defiance, the determination to find Alara. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the oppressive cold retreated. The shadows lightened. The scent of ozone faded. The oppressive presence lifted, leaving behind only the lingering chill of fear and the thumping of my own heart. I stood there shaking for a long time. It had been a test, or a warning. It meant the Shadow Walker could touch my world even if it couldn't fully manifest. It meant I was truly marked, and it meant my preparations, my new understanding, were not just academic. They were essential. I called Lydia immediately, my voice still trembling. She listened patiently. It's testing you, Noah, she said, her voice calm but serious. Seeing how strong your will is, how susceptible you are to fear. And it is also seeking a new path, a new way to cross. Your crossing has left a faint trail, a wound in the veil that it can exploit. You are linked now. So I have to go back, I said, the words feeling heavy with destiny. To sever that link, to find Alara, to close whatever door I opened. Yes, Lydia confirmed, and it needs to be soon. The veil is fluctuating as predicted. A powerful alignment is approaching in 2 weeks. That will be the strongest thinning point, your best chance and your most dangerous. 2 weeks, it wasn't much time. My training intensified. I spent every waking hour in the woods, not just exploring, but learning to feel the land. Lydia, through our calls, guided me through more complex attunement exercises, teaching me to sense the ley lines, to interpret the subtle shifts in the forest's energy. I learned to track by reading the energetic imprints of living things to distinguish the normal wildlife from something other. I practiced using my carved staff not as a weapon, but as a conduit, focusing my intent through it, feeling its connection to the ancient energies. I found myself increasingly comfortable in the wild, not just physically, but spiritually. The forest, which had once been a source of simple pleasure, then profound terror, now felt like a living entity, vast and complex, with secrets to unveil. I learned to move through it silently, like a ghost in the trees. I felt the familiar fear of the shadow walker still lurking, still reaching, but it was now tempered by a growing sense of purpose, a quiet strength. One morning, as the 2 weeks drew to a close, I was sitting by a small stream near my cabin, meditating, trying to clear my mind. I was attuned to the forest, feeling the flow of water, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds. And then I felt something else. A faint but distinct presence, not threatening, not cold, just there. I opened my eyes slowly. Standing on the opposite bank of the stream, partially obscured by a thicket of ferns, was a deer. But it wasn't an ordinary deer. Its antlers, magnificent and sprawling, seemed to be made of polished obsidian, shimmering with faint, ethereal patterns. Its fur was a deep, velvety black, almost absorbing the light, and its eyes, when they met mine, glowed with a soft, silver light. It was impossibly beautiful, ancient, and otherworldly. It watched me for a long moment, unmoving, its gaze intelligent and ancient. I didn't feel fear, only a profound sense of awe and a strange, comforting peace. It felt like a blessing, a recognition. Then, with a gentle nod of its head, it turned and melted back into the shadows of the forest, disappearing as silently as it had appeared. I sat there breathless. It was another sign. This world, my world, was not as simple as I had once believed. The veil truly was thinning. I called Lydia. "I think I saw something," I said, describing the deer. "An echo beast," she replied, her voice filled with reverence. "A creature that exists on both sides of the veil or passes freely between them. To encounter one and feel no fear, to be acknowledged by it, that is a powerful omen, Noah. The woods accept you. They acknowledge your journey." A sense of quiet confidence settled over me. I was no longer just Noah Grant, the lost woodsman. I was something more, something connected to the ancient pulse of the world. The day of the alignment arrived. It was a crisp, clear autumn morning, the air sharp with the scent of pine. I had packed my small, sturdy pack with precision, my oak staff clutched firmly in my hand. The splintered eye carved into its tip seemed to hum with a faint energy. My cold iron knife was sheathed securely at my hip. I left my cabin for what might be the last time, a mix of grim determination and nervous excitement bubbling within me. I was heading for the Blackwood Ridge Trail, not the section where I had first crossed, but towards the area Lydia and my old map had designated as Ayanani, the Whispering Falls. Lydia had given me explicit instructions. "Follow the ley lines, they will lead you, do not deviate. The land will guide you, but only if you listen with more than your ears." As I stepped onto the trail, it felt different this time. I wasn't blindly following. I was sensing. I felt the faint currents beneath my feet like subtle vibrations in the earth. The air, crisp and clear to my normal senses, seemed to pulse with an invisible energy, a rhythm I was only now learning to discern. The trail gradually became less familiar. It twisted and turned in ways that didn't match any modern map, yet I knew instinctively that I was on the right path. The trees here were older, their forms more gnarled, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers. The ground became softer, muddier, even in the absence of rain, and occasionally I would catch a faint whiff of ozone and decay, a reminder of what awaited me. I walked for hours, pushing deeper into the wilderness. My body felt strong, resilient. My mind was focused, clear, free of the chaotic fear that had gripped me on my first journey. I moved with purpose, my staff tapping lightly on the ground, almost like a divining rod guiding me. The terrain grew rougher, the forest denser. I began to see familiar signs, but now they held new meaning. Ancient cairns, piles of stones that had once seemed just old markers, now clearly bore the splintered eye symbol, weathered but still discernible. Certain groves of trees seemed to radiate a quiet power, a sense of ancient stillness. I walked around them, respecting their presence, not disturbing their peace. Finally, as the sun began to dip towards the western horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows through the trees, I heard it, the distant roar of water, the whispering falls. My heart quickened, I was close. But as I approached, a new sound filtered through the thundering roar, a faint, high-pitched whining, a mournful, inhuman wail that seemed to carry on the wind. It was a sound of immense pain, of struggle. Ilera. I broke into a run, pushing my aching muscles to their limit, following the keening sound. It was coming from the direction of the falls, growing louder, more desperate. I burst through a final screen of dense firs into the familiar canyon. The sight that greeted me froze my blood. The whispering falls thundered, filling the air with spray and mist, just as I remembered. The immense stone archway, the thinning point, shimmered violently, pulsating with an unnatural light. And there beneath it was Alara. She was on her knees, her back pressed against the archway, her staff held aloft. Its silvery glow was flickering, dimming, struggling against a horrifying onslaught. The Shadow Walker. It was not alone. Two of them, tall, gaunt, their bark-like forms rippling with dark energy, their clawed limbs lashing out. They had her pinned. One was pressing her against the shimmering arch, its form half merged with the stone, while the other relentlessly struck at her staff, its blows causing the ancient wood to crack and splinter. Ilara was bleeding. A dark, viscous liquid, not unlike the Shadow Walker's own ichor, oozed from a gash on her arm. Her face, grim and set, was contorted in pain and fierce determination. Her hood was down, her dark braids wild around her face, her piercing gray eyes blazing with defiance, but she was faltering. The keening sound was hers, a raw cry of pain and effort. Ilara, I screamed, my voice echoing across the canyon, raw with terror and rage. Both Shadow Walkers froze, their featureless heads snapping towards me. Their oppressive presence instantly shifted, directed at me. The air grew instantly cold, thick with the scent of ozone and decay, and a crushing malevolence. The mark he returns, the fear, ours. The whispers flooded my mind, triumphant, gloating. Ilara looked at me, her eyes widening in disbelief, then a flicker of desperation, and finally a surge of renewed resolve. Noah, no, go back, she rasped, her voice strained. You shouldn't have come. But I wasn't going back, not now, not ever. I raised my staff, the oak wood solid and warm in my grip, the carved, splintered eye glowing faintly with my intent. I focused every ounce of my will, every lesson Lydia had taught me, every fiber of my being on the creatures. "Leave her alone," I roared, my voice surprisingly strong, defiant. One of the shadow walkers detached from Alara, its long, twisted form gliding towards me, its movements eerily silent, like a nightmare made real. Its clawed hand, shimmering with dark energy, extended, reaching for me. My heart hammered, but I stood my ground. I didn't feel the paralyzing fear I had felt before. There was fear, yes, a primal terror, but it was overshadowed by a burning rage, a fierce protectiveness. For Alara, I screamed and charged. It was reckless, it was insane, but it was the only way. I brought my staff down in a wide, sweeping arc, aiming for the creature's arm, just as Alara had done. I focused all my intent, all my defiance into that blow. The carved eye on the staff flared with a blinding, golden light. The impact was devastating. Not a mere splintering of wood, but a powerful crack, like stone being rent apart. The shadow walker shrieked, a tearing, impossible sound of pure agony. Its form buckled, dissolving into a cloud of black smoke that swirled and dissipated momentarily. The air around it crackled, and a wave of concentrated cold blasted outwards, making my skin prickle. I felt a profound exhaustion, a sudden draining of my energy, but also a surge of exhilaration. My staff vibrated in my hand, humming with residual power. I had done it. I had heard it. The other shadow walker, which had still been pressing Alara, turned towards me, its form radiating pure, unadulterated fury. It let out a guttural roar, a sound that vibrated through my bones, promising immediate destruction. "Noah the Iron," Alara cried, her voice weak but urgent. I remembered the hunting knife, cold iron. As the second shadow walker lunged, I drew the knife. Its steel gleamed in the dim light. I held my ground, channeling my intent, my shield, my will into the small blade. The creature's clawed hand swiped at me. I ducked, rolling under its impossibly long arm, a movement I wouldn't have believed myself capable of just weeks ago. As I came up, I lunged, driving the cold iron knife into its bark-like leg just above the knee joint. A sickening sizzle, a cloud of black, noxious vapor erupted from the wound. The shadow walker shrieked, an even more piercing sound than before, and recoiled, thrashing violently. The cold iron burned it, disrupted its very essence. It staggered, its form flickering, partially dissolving, then struggling to reform, racked with unearthly pain. I stood there panting, my staff and knife still ready. The sight of the two injured shadow walkers howling and reeling was terrifying, but also exhilarating. I had faced them, and I had held my own. Alara pushed herself away from the archway, clutching her injured arm. Her gray eyes, though pained, were alight with a fierce pride. "Noah Grant," she gasped, a small, weary smile on her lips. "You truly have changed." The two shadow walkers, wounded and enraged, began to coalesce again, their forms solidifying, their intent clear. They would tear me apart. But they hesitated, their focus now split between two determined opponents. The golden light of my staff, the shimmering cold iron of my knife, and Alara's own weakening but still defiant energy created a powerful barrier against their encroaching darkness. The thinning point, the archway itself, was shimmering more violently now, pulling at the very air around it. The whispers intensified, a chaotic chorus of voices struggling against the growing presence of the shadow walkers. This was the moment, the alignment. "We must go, Noah," Elara cried, her voice strained. "Now the veil is thinnest, they are weakest at the crossing." I nodded, gripping my staff. My heart was thundering, but my purpose was clear. I had come for her. I would not leave her again. "Together," I said, meeting her gaze. Elara managed another weary smile. "Together." She stumbled towards me, leaning heavily against the shimmering archway. The two shadow walkers roared, gathering their strength for a final, decisive assault. "Hold them back," Elara urged, pushing me towards the arch. "I need a moment. The crossing is difficult when injured." I understood. She was weakened. She needed me to buy her time. I turned to face the two enraged shadow walkers, holding my staff defensively, the cold iron knife ready. They charged, a wave of cold and malice washing over me. "You will not pass," I roared, pushing all my fear, all my anger, all my will into my voice, into my staff. The carved eye at its tip flared again, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The shadow walkers hesitated, momentarily confused by my sudden ferocity. This was not the terrified prey they had encountered before. This was a challenger, a guardian. This brief pause was all Elara needed. With a desperate gasp, she threw herself into the shimmering archway. The air around it rippled violently, swallowing her form. For a moment, she was gone. Now it was just me, alone, against two enraged shadow walkers. Their featureless faces radiated pure fury. They moved as one, lunging forward, their dark forms converging on me. The whispers intensified, screaming in my mind, promising oblivion. I stood my ground, my staff held high, the cold iron knife gleaming. My heart hammered, but I was no longer afraid, only resolute. For Elara, for my world. I channeled all my remaining energy, all my training, all my newfound understanding into one final act of defiance. The splintered eye on my staff blazed, pushing back against the encroaching darkness, illuminating the terrifying forms of the shadow walkers. I felt a profound sense of connection to the land, to the old magic, to Elara. Then, with a final, desperate roar, I plunged into the shimmering gateway, staff held high, cold iron knife ready. The world exploded into chaos again, but this time it was different. I was ready. I knew what to expect. The pulls and tugs, the flashes of memory, the whispering voices, they were all there, bombarding me. But I had a shield. I had intent, I had purpose. "You are lost, you are ours, you cannot escape." The whispers raged, trying to ensnare me, to break my will. But I pushed back, picturing Elara, picturing my cabin, picturing the deer in the woods. I am Noah Grant, I am bringing her home. The fight continued within the veil itself, a battle of wills. The Shadow Walker's influence was potent, even here, reaching through the chaotic swirl of images and sounds assaulted me once more, but this time it was different. I wasn't just falling, I was fighting. The whispers roared, trying to tear at my resolve, to remind me of every fear, every doubt, every moment of weakness. "You are alone. She is gone. Give up, give in." But I pushed back, channeling everything Lydia had taught me, every surge of defiance that had brought me back to this terrifying precipice. My mind was a shield, not just protecting me, but pushing outwards, radiating my intent. I saw Alara's fierce, determined face, her weary but resolute smile. I saw the sun-dappled glade near my cabin where the echo beast had appeared, a symbol of the world I fought to protect. The pulling sensation intensified, trying to stretch me to break my focus. But I tightened my grip on my staff, feeling the familiar hum of the carved oak. The cold iron knife, still clutched in my other hand, felt like an anchor, grounding me in my purpose. I am Noah Grant. I am bringing her home. The mantra echoed in my mind, a beacon in the madness. Then, with a final, violent wrench, the void shattered. I landed hard, sprawling onto damp, mossy ground. The air was thick and humid, smelling of rich earth and decaying leaves. The thundering roar of the Whispering Falls was muted here, a distant rumble, replaced by the gentle drip of water from unseen leaves and the soft rustle of wind through impossibly tall trees. I pushed myself up, groaning, my entire body aching. My head swam, and for a moment the world spun, but then my eyes focused. I was in the Echo Lands. The forest here was different from the last time. It was still ancient, still possessing that unsettling sense of wrongness, but the oppressive gloom had lessened. The light, though filtered through dense canopies, seemed richer, greener, almost emerald in places. The trees, while still grand and gnarled, didn't seem to press in with the same malevolence. Instead, they stood like silent sentinels, watching. My eyes scanned the immediate surroundings. I was in a small, verdant clearing, carpeted with thick moss and ferns. Overhead, the canopy was a tapestry of interwoven branches, some glowing with a soft, bioluminescent moss, others draped with long, silvery lichen that swayed gently in an unseen breeze. This wasn't the Heartwood spruce clearing, nor the immediate vicinity of the Whispering Falls. I had landed in a new section of the Echo Lands. "Ilara," I called out, my voice hoarse. "Ilara, are you here?" Silence, only the drip of water, the rustle of leaves, and the distant rumble of the falls answered. The panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm me. Had I failed? Had she been taken? Or had she simply landed elsewhere? I forced myself to breathe, to remember Lydia's teachings. Calm, focus, sense the ley lines. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting my other senses take over. I felt the subtle vibrations in the earth beneath me, the faint currents of energy. They pulsed, guiding me, not towards the falls, but in a different direction, deeper into the forest. I opened my eyes, gripping my staff tighter. The carved, splintered eye on its tip glowed with a faint, steady light, a testament to my focused intent. The cold iron knife was still secured at my hip. I was prepared. I started walking, moving with purpose, following the invisible pull of the ley lines. The terrain here was challenging, a labyrinth of twisted roots, fallen logs swallowed by moss, and dense thickets of strange, glowing flora. Every step was a test, a reminder of the dangerous beauty of this realm. As I moved, I became acutely aware of the forest sounds. Not just the natural sounds, but the subtle, almost imperceptible whispers that seemed to emanate from the very trees. They weren't the aggressive, fear-inducing whispers of the thinning point. These were softer, like distant conversations, murmuring secrets in a language I couldn't comprehend. They felt less malevolent, more ancient, more watchful. I kept my senses alert, my gaze sweeping through the shadowed glades. I was searching for Ilara, but also for any sign of the shadow walkers. Lydia's warning echoed in my mind, "They will hunt you." After what felt like an hour, the ley lines led me towards a small, rocky outcrop, partially overgrown with glowing vines. I approached cautiously, my staff held ready. As I rounded a cluster of iridescent fungi, I saw her. Ilera. She was slumped against a damp rock face, eyes closed, her breathing shallow and ragged. Her staff, its silvery light now barely a flicker, lay beside her. The wound on her arm where the shadow walker had struck her was dark and weeping, but there were other injuries too, a deep gash on her leg and a nasty bruise blossoming on her temple. She was pale, almost translucent in the dim light, and a faint, shimmering aura like heat haze rose from her body. Ilera, I rushed to her side, dropping to my knees. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then widened in surprise and a flicker of something that looked like anger, quickly replaced by relief. Noah, you came back, she whispered, her voice weak. Of course I came back, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I told you I wouldn't leave you. I carefully reached out, checking her pulse, feeling her clammy skin. She was cold, dangerously so. The shimmering aura was growing stronger, an indication of fading life force. You're hurt, I said, my voice filled with concern. She gave a weak, dismissive wave of her hand. The crossing drains the injured, and they pressed me hard. She coughed, a dry, painful sound. Where are we? I'm not sure, I admitted, looking around. A new section. I followed the ley lines. They led me to you. A faint, tired smile touched her lips. Lydia's training, I presume. You learn quickly, woodsman. She helped me understand, I said, and she warned me about the shadow walkers hunting me, about the veil thinning. She said you were old blood. Allura closed her eyes again, wincing. Old stories, doesn't matter now, I am weakened. They will be back, Noah. They felt your anger, your defiance, you wounded them. I know, I said grimly. That's why we need to move, but first you need help. I pulled out my first aid kit. It felt woefully inadequate, but it was all I had. I cleaned her arm wound as best I could, binding it tightly with sterile gauze. The gash on her leg was deeper, requiring more careful attention. As I worked, her eyes remained closed, her breathing still shallow. The shimmering aura around her intensified. This wasn't just physical injury, it was something deeper, a spiritual drain. They feed on fear, I murmured, remembering Lydia's words, and they drain vitality. More than that now, Allura whispered, opening her eyes, which now held a distant, haunted look. My staff, it splintered, its heartwood, fractured. It takes time, energy to mend it, and my connection, it's frayed. I pushed too hard against too many. Too many? I asked, my blood running cold. You mean there were more than 2 shadow walkers at the falls? She nodded weakly. 3. A lesser one joined the 2 that had you pinned. They were waiting. They knew I would try to guide you across. They felt the thinning point pulsing. I felt a fresh wave of horror. She had faced 3 of them. My guilt returned, a crushing weight. I've put you in more danger. No, she said, her voice stronger, though still weak. My path was set long ago. You merely accelerated it, and you returned. That changes things. You are unexpected. She paused, her eyes searching mine. You are strong, Noah Grant, stronger than you know. You truly wielded the old magic at the crossing. The veiled splitter, your staff, it sang. Lydia helped me learn, I replied, but I still don't know enough. How do we get out of here? How do we get you back to strength? We must find a place of rest, Allura said, trying to push herself up. I gently helped her, supporting her weight. She swayed, clearly disoriented, but managed to stand, leaning heavily on me. A nexus point of healing. There is one nearby, a small moon pool hidden by the veil weavers. It is a place of deep stillness, pure energy, but it will be guarded. Guarded by whom? I asked, my hand instinctively going to the cold iron knife. The spirits of the forest, perhaps, or the shadow walkers. They seek out places of power to corrupt them, to turn them to their own darkness. And to find it, we will need something more than ley lines. She fumbled at her neck, producing a small leather pouch. From within it, she pulled out a curious object. It was a smooth, polished stone, dark as obsidian, but with faint, iridescent patterns swirling within it. It looked almost alive, like a captured nebula. "The Seeker's Stone," she whispered, pressing it into my hand. It was cold to the touch, but I felt a faint vibration, a hum of energy. It guides through the deeper currents, the spirit paths. It will pulse towards the moon pool. But it is delicate, and it will not lie. It will show us the fastest path regardless of danger. I looked at the stone, then at Alara. Her face was etched with pain, but her eyes held a fierce resolve. "All right," I said, putting the stone in my pocket, feeling its steady hum against my leg. "Show me the way." We started moving slowly, cautiously. Alara leaned heavily on my good shoulder, her staff dragging on the mossy ground. My own staff, the veiled splitter I now called it, was held ready in my other hand. The Seeker's Stone pulsed, a faint warmth against my leg, guiding me deeper into the ancient, enigmatic forest. The whispers seemed to grow louder as we moved, more insistent, like the forest itself was trying to communicate or perhaps warn us. I tried to discern meaning, but it was just a chaotic murmur. After a short while, Alara, clearly in distress, urged me to hurry. "They will be tracking me. They can sense my fading connection. We must reach the moon pool before they do." The thought spurred me on. I half-carried Alara, pushing through dense thickets of glowing fungi and strange, bioluminescent flora. The Seeker's Stone pulsed more strongly now, guiding us with an unwavering resolve. It led us off what appeared to be any discernible path, through areas where the trees twisted into even more improbable shapes, their branches forming natural archways and tunnels. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the forest's murmurs, a low, guttural growl followed by the snapping of twigs. My blood ran cold. "Shadow walkers," I whispered, gripping my staff. Alara tensed beside me. "Close, too close, get ready, Noah." The Seeker's Stone pulsed frantically, urging us forward, but a deep sense of dread warned me that we were about to be cut off. From the deepest shadows of the ancient trees, a form began to coalesce. Not one, but two. Leaner, faster than the one I had fought at the falls, these appeared to be lesser shadow walkers, perhaps the one Alara had mentioned and another. Their forms were less defined, more like swirling shadows given fleeting substance, their bark-like limbs mere suggestions of bone and sinew. But their intent was clear, to intercept us. "We cannot fight them both, Noah," Alara gasped, her voice strained. "Not in my condition. The moon pool is nearby. You must draw them away. Buy me time to reach it." "No," I said, my jaw tightening. "I won't leave you again." "Fool," she snapped, a flash of her old fire returning. "This is not a choice. I will only slow you down. The pool is my only chance. Distract them, lead them away, then circle back. The ley lines will show you the way to me." Her logic was undeniable. I was faster, less injured. If I stayed, we would both be caught. "Go," I urged, helping her stand on her own for a moment. "The stone will guide me back." Take my staff, she said, pushing her own staff into my hand. Its light was faint, but still present. It will aid your own. 2 conduits are stronger than 1. I hesitated, then took the ancient staff. It felt impossibly light, yet resonated with a deep power in my hand. My own staff felt a surge of energy, drawing strength from Alara's. Now Noah, go, Alara cried, pushing me away. I looked at the 2 shadow walkers, now fully formed and gliding towards us, their featureless faces radiating hunger. The whispers intensified, a chorus of malevolence. Prey, fear, ours. With a guttural roar, I turned and plunged deeper into the forest, away from Alara, hoping to draw their attention. Hey, over here, you pieces of shadow, I yelled, waving my staffs, trying to sound more confident than I felt. It worked. Their oppressive presence instantly shifted, directed solely at me. With a hiss of rage, the 2 shadow walkers changed course, dissolving into swift, dark blurs as they pursued me. I ran faster than I ever thought possible, through the impossibly dense forest, weaving between ancient trees, leaping over gnarled roots. The Seeker's stone, still in my pocket, throbbed with a frantic rhythm, guiding me away from Alara, drawing the creatures deeper into the labyrinthine woods. The shadow walkers were relentless. They moved with terrifying speed, silent and swift, occasionally appearing from unexpected angles, forcing me to dodge, to change direction. Their whispers clawed at my mind, trying to plant doubt, to sow despair, to exhaust me. You are weak, you are lost, your courage is a lie. I fought back against the psychic assault, remembering Lydia's words, visualizing my shield. I poured my defiance into my steps, into my breath. My 2 staffs, Alara's and my own, hummed in my hands, a dual conduit of ancient power, offering a small measure of protection. I risked a glance back. They were gaining. Their long, clawed hands, shimmering with dark energy, were reaching for me. My heart pounded like a drum against my ribs. I couldn't outrun them forever. I needed a plan. I remembered Lydia's lessons about the echo lands, about using the environment, about focused intent. The trees here were different. Some were hollowed out, ancient, cavernous. Others were entwined with glowing, thorny vines. An idea, desperate and reckless, flashed into my mind. I needed to create a distraction, a barrier, something to slow them down. I spotted an ancient, impossibly wide tree, its trunk split and hollowed, forming a natural tunnel. It was covered in thick, thorny vines that pulsed with a faint, iridescent light. It was a risk. I darted towards it, pushing through a thicket of ferns, hearing the frantic whispers of the shadow walkers close behind me. Just as I reached the opening of the hollowed tree, I turned, bringing both staffs up defensively. The first shadow walker lunged, its clawed hand swiping at me. I ducked, sweeping my own staff upwards, aiming for its arm. The carved, splintered eye flared, channeling my intent. At the same moment, I thrust Alara's staff forward, its tip glowing with a faint, silvery light, into the heart of the thorny vines. The effect was instantaneous and violent. My staff connected with the shadow walker, sending it reeling back with a shriek of pain, its form flickering. But Alara's staff, infused with her old blood magic, activated the dormant energy in the thorny vines. They writhed, pulsing with a sudden, brilliant light, and then exploded outwards, growing impossibly fast, forming a dense, thorny barrier across the entrance of the hollowed tree, crackling with raw energy. The second shadow walker, caught off guard, slammed into the rapidly growing barrier with a guttural roar. The thorns, sharp as obsidian, tore at its shadowy form, and it recoiled with a howl of agony, black ichor oozing from where the glowing thorns pierced it. I stumbled backwards into the hollow of the tree, panting, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. I had bought myself a few precious seconds. The shadow walkers, though injured, were not deterred. They snarled, their whispers turning into a frustrated roar as they tried to find a way through the rapidly growing, glowing, thorny barrier. I could hear them thrashing, their black energy crackling against the pulsing vines. I knew this wouldn't hold them forever, but it was enough to get some distance, enough to try and circle back to Alara. I plunged deeper into the hollowed tree, navigating the darkness, relying on the faint light emanating from my staff and the pulsing seeker's stone. The tunnel twisted and turned, eventually leading me out into another part of the forest, a deep, shadowed ravine. I paused, catching my breath, listening. The sounds of the shadow walkers' struggle with the thorny barrier were fading, replaced by the persistent murmuring of the forest. I was safe for now. But Alara wasn't. I had to find her. The Seeker's stone, which had been guiding me away from her, now pulsed with a steady rhythm, directing me back towards the moon pool. I started moving again, faster this time, following the stone's guidance. The terrain grew steeper, the air colder, carrying the faint scent of fresh water. I knew I was getting close. The ley lines, too, seemed to converge here, their invisible currents swirling with heightened energy, a sensation I was now attuned to. This place hummed with power. Finally, the forest opened into a breathtaking, ethereal glade. It was unlike anything I had seen before, even in the Echo Lands. At the center was a pool of water, perfectly still and utterly black like polished obsidian, yet it emanated a soft, silvery light, illuminating the glade with an otherworldly glow. This was no ordinary water. It was the moon pool Alara had spoken of, a nexus of healing. Ancient trees, their bark swirling with iridescent patterns, ringed the pool. Their branches, heavy with glowing, bell-shaped flowers, drooped towards the water, shedding soft, luminous petals onto its surface. The air here was cool and pure, free of the oppressive cold of the shadow walkers, and the incessant whispers of the forest were replaced by a gentle, melodic hum, like distant chimes. And there, at the edge of the pool, was Alara. She was immersed in the black, shimmering water up to her chest, her eyes closed, her head tilted back. The shimmering aura around her body was gone, replaced by a soft, silvery glow that seemed to emanate from the water itself, bathing her in its healing light. The wounds on her arm and leg were still visible, but they no longer bled, and the dark, viscous liquid had been washed away. Her breathing was deeper, more even. She looked peaceful, almost ethereal. I approached cautiously, my staffs lowered, overwhelmed by the serene beauty of the glade. I had never seen anything like it. As I neared, her eyes fluttered open. They met mine, and a faint, genuine smile touched her lips. "Noah," she whispered, her voice stronger, clearer, "you made it, and you bought me enough time." Are you healing?" I asked, awe in my voice. She nodded slowly. "The moon pool. It draws on the ley lines, on the pure energy of the land. It mends what is broken, but it is not a quick cure, and it leaves one vulnerable. Vulnerable, I repeated, my gaze sweeping the glade. It felt safe, but my instincts were still on high alert. The veil weavers, she explained, gesturing vaguely towards the trees. They guard this place. They are neutral, neither benevolent nor malevolent, but they do not suffer intruders, especially those who disrupt the balance. Veil weavers, I asked, confused. I saw no one. As if in answer, a ripple passed through the ancient trees ringing the pool. The glowing flowers on their branches began to sway, and from the shifting patterns of bark and light, forms began to emerge. They were tall, slender figures, almost indistinguishable from the trees themselves, their skin like living bark, their eyes glowing with the same silvery light as the moon pool. They moved with silent, fluid grace, observing us with an ancient, unblinking gaze. They were beautiful, yet profoundly unnerving. They were the guardians, and they were watching. They are the silent ones, Alara said, her voice soft. They maintain the veil, nurture the thinning points, protect the sacred places. They do not speak in words, but they feel the intent of all who enter their domain. I lowered my staffs completely, an instinct born of respect. I wasn't here to fight them. I was here seeking sanctuary. Ilara emerged from the pool, the silvery light clinging to her skin. Her movements were still stiff, but noticeably stronger. The deep gash on her leg was closing slowly, and the bruise on her temple had faded to a light discoloration. She was still pale, but the vibrancy was returning to her eyes. She retrieved her staff, which still lay near the pool's edge. Its light, though still dim, had steadied. "It will take time to fully mend," she said, looking at the staff with a touch of sadness. "Its heartwood is tired." "We don't have time," I said grimly. "The shadow walkers, I think I delayed them, but they won't be far behind." They were enraged. Alara nodded, her gaze serious. "Then we must be ready. You did well, Noah, to lead them away and to return here. You are proving yourself a true woodsman of this realm." "Lydia's lessons," I repeated, "and your courage, you gave me both." We stood together by the moon pool, surrounded by the silent, watchful veil weavers. The sense of peace was profound, but the knowledge of the approaching danger was a palpable tension in the air. "What's the plan?" I asked, gripping my staffs. "How do we get out of here? How do we stop them?" Alara looked towards the entrance of the glade, her eyes narrowed. "The moon pool's energy is potent, a wellspring of pure life. It is anathema to the shadow walkers. They cannot truly enter this glade, not without being severely weakened. But they will try. They will corrupt the edges, trying to draw us out. So we're trapped here." "No," she said, a flicker of an idea in her eyes. "We use this place. We use its power. You have two staffs now, Noah, yours imbued with your intent and mine with the old magic. We can create a focal point, a blast of pure, disruptive energy. Like at the falls. Stronger, much stronger, the moon pool itself is a nexus. We can channel its energy, combine it with our own, and send them back to the deepest shadows, if only for a time." "How?" Alara picked up her staff, its light now a steady silver. "You will need to open yourself completely, Noah, to the ley lines, to the spirit of this place. To channel the energy of the moon pool through both staffs and through yourself. It will be intense, dangerous. If your intent wavers, if your focus breaks, the energy could consume you." I looked at the serene, glowing pool, then at the silent veil weavers, their forms blending with the ancient trees. A profound sense of purpose, of destiny, settled over me. This was why I had returned. This was my fight now. "I'm ready," I said, my voice firm. Alara nodded, a grim determination on her face. "Then we prepare. They will be here soon." We spent the next few minutes in silence, Alara guiding me through a rapid, focused meditation. I closed my eyes, opening myself to the subtle energies of the glade. I felt the cool, pure energy of the moon pool radiating outwards, the ancient stillness of the trees, the deep hum of the ley lines converging beneath our feet. My staffs felt like extensions of my own being, conduits for this raw, ancient power. As I meditated, Alara whispered instructions, her voice soft but urgent. "Feel the flow, Noah. Let it fill you. Let it course through the staffs. Focus your intent, pure defiance, pure light. You are a channel, a weapon." I felt a building pressure, a surge of energy within me like a tempest brewing. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, terrifying. The air around me began to crackle, and the carved, splintered eye on my staff pulsed with an inner light mirroring the deepening glow of Alara's. Just as the energy reached its peak, a ripple of malice washed over the glade. The gentle hum of the veil weavers turned into a low, warning thrum. The soft, luminous petals ceased their fall. They were here. From the entrance of the glade, where the shadows clung thickest, the two shadow walkers emerged. Their forms were darker, their whispers more aggressive, radiating pure, unadulterated rage. They had bypassed the thorny barrier, clearly infuriated by my evasion. Black ichor still oozed from the places where the thorns had pierced them, but their forms were solid, their intent singular, destruction. "Fear, despair, we take you now." The whispers screamed in my mind, a chaotic chorus of malevolence attempting to break my focus, to sow terror. But I held firm, my intent unwavering. The energy coursing through me was a shield, a bulwark against their psychic assault. Alara stood beside me, her staff raised, her gray eyes blazing with renewed strength. "Now, Noah," she cried, "unleash it." I opened my eyes, meeting the terrible gaze of the shadow walkers. I raised both staffs, crossing them over my head, channeling every ounce of the moon pool's energy, every bit of my own will, every lesson Lydia had taught me into this single, decisive blow. "Begone!" I roared, my voice reverberating with the raw power flowing through me, amplified by the ancient energy of the glade. A blinding, incandescent blast of pure white and silver light erupted from the crossed staffs, lancing forward towards the shadow walkers. It wasn't just light, it was concentrated will, focused defiance, pure life energy. The shadow walkers shrieked, a sound of unimaginable agony and outrage. The blast slammed into them, tearing through their shadowy forms. They recoiled, their bark-like limbs thrashing, dissolving into clouds of black smoke that screamed as they dissipated. The very air around them crackled and burned, the light an anathema to their shadowy existence. They weren't destroyed, not truly. But they were shattered, their forms unable to hold together in the face of such concentrated power. They were forced back, screaming into the deeper shadows of the forest, their oppressive presence recoiling from the glade like a burned hand. The glade fell silent. The light from my staffs faded, and the overwhelming energy within me subsided, leaving me weak, trembling, but profoundly exhilarated. The air still crackled with residual power, but the heavy cloak of malice was gone. Ilara stood beside me, her staff lowered, her breathing deep and even. A look of awe mixed with pride was on her face. "Remarkable, Noah," she whispered. "Truly remarkable. You channeled it all." I could only nod, panting, my legs feeling like jelly. I had done it. We had driven them back. The Veil Weavers, which had watched the entire confrontation in stoic silence, now began to hum again, their melodic thrum echoing through the glade. The luminous petals once again drifted gently onto the black surface of the moon pool. The balance had been restored, for now. "They will return," Ilara said, her voice grim. "Not soon, perhaps, but they will. And their master will know of your power, Noah. You have become a target like no other." I nodded, the gravity of her words settling over me. I knew this wasn't over. This was just one battle in a much larger war. "What now?" I asked, my voice still hoarse. "How do we get back to my world?" Ilara walked to the edge of the moon pool, looking into its shimmering depths. "We rest first, recharge, and we must repair my staff. It needs the pure energy of this place. Then we seek another thinning point, not Aonani. It will be heavily watched now. We need a less conspicuous crossing." "A less conspicuous crossing," I repeated, feeling a surge of despair. "How do we find it?" "The Seeker's Stone will guide us," she said, looking at me. "And your own growing attunement, Noah. You can feel the ley lines now. You can sense the shifts. You are no longer blind." She was right. I was different. The fear was still there, a healthy respect for the dangers of this world, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was tempered by a newfound strength, a connection to something ancient and powerful. I had faced the impossible, and I had prevailed. "We need a plan," I said, a flicker of my old, rational self returning, but now infused with a new understanding. "A way to get out and a way to warn my world. Lydia said the veil is thinning everywhere. This isn't just about us anymore." Ilara looked at me, a rare, genuine smile gracing her lips. "Indeed, woodsman, it is much larger than us, and you, Noah Grant, are now a part of it, a crucial part." We spent the next few days in the Moonpool Glade. Ilara immersed herself frequently in the healing waters, regaining her strength. Her staff, too, slowly drew power from the pool, its silvery light growing brighter, its fractured heartwood slowly mending. I too used the time to meditate, to replenish my own energy, and to deepen my connection to the ley lines and the spirit of the forest. The Veil Weavers continued to watch us, silent and observant, but never hostile. During this time, Ilara told me more about the Echo Lands, about the delicate balance between worlds, and about the rising darkness. She explained that the Shadow Walkers were not merely creatures of malice, but instruments of a deeper, more ancient entity, a corrupting force that sought to merge the Echo Lands with the mortal realm, dissolving the veil completely. "This is not a new war, Noah," she explained one evening, her voice low as we sat by the softly glowing pool. "It is an ancient one rising again. The Veil Weavers, the old blood, the Guardians, we have always been here, trying to maintain the balance. But the veil is thinning, truly thinning, due to changes in your world. The weakening of your connection to the old ways, the disruption of the land, the sheer population. It feeds the encroaching darkness." "So my world is making it worse?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. She nodded grimly. "Unknowingly, your world's progress often comes at a cost to the older, deeper currents of the land. It weakens the veil, creating more thinning points, more opportunities for the Shadow Walkers to cross. And your peoples fear their disconnection. It is a feast for them." The weight of this knowledge was immense. It wasn't just about saving Alara or even just stopping the shadow walkers. It was about the fate of two worlds intertwined, both teetering on the brink. I told her about Lydia, about the online forum, about the nascent network of people who were starting to sense the truth. Alara listened with a rare flicker of hope in her eyes. "Good," she murmured. "The seeds are sprouting. Perhaps there is still time." After several days, Alara was nearly fully recovered, and her staff glowed with a steady, strong silver light. My own staff felt vibrant in my hand, its carved eye pulsating with my amplified intent. My connection to the ley lines was sharper than ever, a constant hum beneath my perception, guiding me. It was time to leave. We bade farewell to the silent veil weavers, offering our thanks. As we walked away from the moon pool glade, I felt a sense of profound reverence for this sacred place and a deep understanding of the delicate balance it represented. The Seeker's Stone, which had been silent during our stay at the moon. The Seeker's Stone, which had been silent during our stay at the moon pool, now pulsed with a soft, steady rhythm against my leg as we left the glade. Its faint warmth was a comforting presence in the cool, silent forest. We walked away from the glade, the melodic hum of the veil weavers fading behind us, replaced by the ancient murmurs of the echo lands. Alara walked with a renewed spring in her step, her staff held upright, its silver light a beacon in the perpetual twilight of this realm. Her eyes, no longer haunted by pain, scanned the dense canopy and the twisted roots around us, sharp and vigilant. My own staff, the veiled splitter, felt solid and vibrant in my hand, its carved eye seeming to hum with a readiness I now shared. "The moon pool is a sanctuary," Alara said, her voice clear, "but it is not a hiding place. The shadow walkers will be searching, their malice a beacon for others of their kind. We must move quickly and silently." I nodded, my senses heightened, attuned to every rustle, every shift in the air. The forest seemed to breathe around us, a living entity with 1,000 eyes. The ley lines beneath our feet pulsed, a complex network of invisible currents, and I found myself interpreting their flow almost instinctively, a newfound language I was learning to speak. Our path was guided by the Seeker's Stone, which pulled us deeper into the unknown reaches of the Echo Lands. It was a relentless guide, leading us through landscapes both terrifying and wondrous. We traversed vast swamps where glowing fungi pulsed like forgotten hearts in the muck, and the air hung heavy with a sweet, cloying scent. We climbed ancient, moss-covered mountains whose peaks touched an unseen sky, their stone faces carved with symbols that seemed to shift and ritter as we watched. We wound through canyons where luminous rivers flowed with water that sang a haunting melody. The shadow walkers were relentless in their pursuit. We felt their presence long before we saw them, a sudden drop in temperature, the acrid scent of ozone and decay, the insidious whispers that tried to crawl into my mind. Alara taught me to use my heightened senses not just to feel their proximity, but to discern their numbers, their intent, even their subtle weaknesses. Our first encounter came 2 days after leaving the moon pool. We were moving through a grove of skeletal trees, their branches devoid of leaves, their bark shimmering with a faint, crystalline frost. The Seeker's Stone pulsed frantically, and the whispers intensified, no longer distant murmurs, but a chilling chorus closing in. "The 3 of them," Alara whispered, her hand tightening on her staff. "Lesser ones still, but they are swift." We plunged into a maze of ice-covered roots, using the dense terrain to our advantage. The shadow walkers were like wraiths, their forms dissolving and reforming through the gloom, their clawed hands reaching, their whispers screeching with a frantic hunger. I fought alongside Alara, a dance of staffs and focused intent. My veiled splitter met their forms with resounding cracks, sending ripples of golden light through their shadowy essence. Alara's staff, now fully mended, flared with silver, lashing out with ancient magic. We wounded them, drove them back into the shadows, but we could not destroy them completely. Each encounter was a draining ordeal, pushing our strength and our nerve. We learned to anticipate their attacks, to exploit their momentary hesitations, and to move on before they could fully recover. One evening, as twilight deepened into the inky blackness of the Echo Lands, we found ourselves resting in a small cave, hidden behind a waterfall that shimmered with ghostly light. Ilara was tending to a minor gash on my arm, acquired during an encounter with a particularly aggressive shadow walker that had learned to cloak itself in the forest's murmurs. "They are learning," Ilara murmured, her touch gentle but firm as she applied a poultice of local herbs. "They adapt. The master is testing you, Noah, testing your limits and your anger. That is what it truly desires to feed upon." "My anger?" I asked, surprised. My anger at the shadow walkers, at their terror, at their threat to Ilara, had always felt like a source of strength. She nodded. "Fear is its bread and butter, but anger, untamed, it is a corrosive fire, a wound it can exploit, turn against you. Focused intent, yes, defiance, yes, but pure, unbridled rage will only hasten your fall into its grasp. It seeks to corrupt, not merely consume." The words struck me, a cold realization. I had been fueled by rage at times, particularly at the thinning point. It had given me power, but it had also felt dangerous, uncontrolled. I spent the next few days trying to temper that fire, to channel it into a colder, more precise resolve. It was harder than I thought, a constant battle against my own primal instincts. As we journeyed deeper, the nature of the Echo Lands itself seemed to shift. We began to encounter more of the Echo Beasts, creatures that existed between the worlds. I saw magnificent deer with antlers like crystalline light, owls with eyes of liquid starlight, and wolves whose fur shimmered with the colors of a dying nebula. They watched us from the shadows, their gazes ancient and intelligent, neither helping nor hindering, but simply observing. They felt like the true inhabitants of this realm, ancient spirits connected to the land in ways I could only begin to fathom. Alara explained that these creatures were sensitive to the veil's fluctuations. They are drawn to the thinning just as the shadow walkers are. They seek balance even if they don't actively fight for it. They are part of the old currents. The Seeker's Stone led us for what felt like weeks, though time in the Echo Lands was fluid, difficult to measure. We ate dried rations, supplemented by strange, edible fungi Alara identified, and purified water from the glowing rivers. My body grew leaner, my senses sharper, my stamina seemingly limitless. I moved through the forest like a native, silent and watchful. I had shed the last remnants of my old life, becoming truly a woodsman of this realm. One morning, the stone pulsed with an almost violent intensity, pulling us towards a jagged, desolate mountain range. The air here was thin and sharp, smelling of mineral and ozone. The sky, usually a shifting tapestry of muted greens and purples, was a bruised, oppressive gray, heavy with an unseen weight. "This is it," Alara said, her voice tight with anticipation. "A deep thinning point, old, powerful, but unstable, and it will be heavily guarded." As we ascended the treacherous, winding paths of the mountain, the landscape grew increasingly stark. The trees dwindled, replaced by gnarled, obsidian-like rock formations that clawed at the sky. The whispers, which had been a constant companion, now morphed into a low, mournful moan carried on the wind, a sound of profound desolation. We came to a narrow ridge overlooking a vast chasm. At its bottom, far below, a great swirling vortex of dark energy pulsed, drawing the very light from the air. It was a rift, a gaping wound in the veil, far larger and more menacing than the Whispering Falls. This was no mere thinning point. It was a gaping maw, an open doorway for the Shadow Walker's master. And guarding it at the very edge of the chasm were not just a few lesser Shadow Walkers. There were dozens. Their forms, usually shifting and indistinct, were here more solid, more menacing. They lined the rim of the chasm like a terrifying army, their featureless heads turning in unison as they sensed our approach. But they were not alone. Standing at the very center of their formation, a figure of immense power radiated an aura of crushing malevolence that eclipsed anything I had felt before. It was taller than the others, its bark-like form darker, interwoven with lines of glowing, blood-red energy. Its clawed hands were massive, and from its featureless head, 2 points like broken horns jutted towards the bruised sky. This was the Master, the Shadow Walker, and it was waiting for us. He comes, the marked one, the defiance. Ours. The whispers screamed in my mind, not just from the horde, but from the Master itself, a voice that was both 1,000 voices and a single, ancient, predatory will. It felt like my very thoughts were being pried open, examined, judged. Alara gasped beside me, clutching her staff. "The architect," she whispered, her face pale. "It has fully manifested. This is a trap, Noah, a grand deception." My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. The sheer number of Shadow Walkers was overwhelming. To fight them all was suicide. The architect took a step forward, its form radiating an almost palpable hunger. The horde of lesser Shadow Walkers stirred, a low, guttural growl rippling through their ranks. "We cannot engage them all," I said, my voice barely a whisper but firm. "Not here, not now." Alara nodded, her gaze sweeping the terrain. "There is another way, an old passage, hidden from their sight perhaps if we are swift, but it leads directly to the heart of the rift." The heart. Yes, a crucible point where the veil is weakest, but also where the two worlds can be truly joined or severed. It is where they plan their full invasion, and where we can strike at the very fabric of their crossing. She pointed to a fissure in the cliff face, partially obscured by a curtain of shimmering, phosphorescent moss. It was narrow, dangerous, and likely unseen by the masked Shadow Walkers. "It will be dangerous," she warned. "Inside, the veil is thin, fluctuating wildly. Illusions will plague you, it will try to break your mind, and the architect will send its strongest to intercept us within." "We have no choice," I said, gripping my staffs. My fear was immense, but so was my resolve. I had come this far, I would not turn back. With a shared nod, we darted towards the hidden fissure. The horde of Shadow Walkers snarled, sensing our movement, but their massed ranks, too focused on the chasm, were slow to react. The architect let out a soundless roar, its aura flaring, and several of the lesser Shadow Walkers detached from the main group, dissolving into swift blurs as they launched themselves after us. We scrambled into the fissure, the phosphorescent moss brushing against our faces. The passage narrowed immediately, plunging us into absolute darkness, broken only by the faint glow of our staffs and the pulsating Seeker's stone. The air grew instantly colder, thick with the scent of ozone and the oppressive weight of the thinning veil. The whispers intensified inside the passage, no longer just words, but a cacophony of distorted sounds and fragmented images. Memories, fears, doubts, they all swirled around me, trying to disorient, to paralyze. Lost. Alone. Ilara is a lie. Your world is gone. There is no hope. I fought back, visualizing my shield, pushing the chaos away. Ilara, her face grim, walked beside me, her staff held high, its silvery light a steady anchor against the encroaching madness. She seemed to draw strength from my presence, just as I drew strength from hers. The passage was a labyrinth. It twisted downwards through jagged rock and treacherous drops, sometimes opening into small, unstable caverns, sometimes forcing us to squeeze through cracks barely wide enough for our bodies. The ley lines here were a roaring torrent, a maelstrom of raw energy that threatened to tear my senses apart. "Stay focused, Noah," Ilara urged, her voice strained. "Do not believe what you see or hear. It is all illusion." Indeed, the passage began to play tricks on my mind. I saw glimpses of my cabin, serene and peaceful, then ravaged and burning. I heard Ilara's voice, sweet and loving, then harsh and condemning. I saw shadows of Ilara herself, alluring, beckoning me down side passages, only for the true Ilara to pull me back, her grip firm. "They want to split us," she whispered, her eyes narrowed, discerning the true path through the psychic minefield. We pressed on, fighting not just the environment, but the assault on our minds. The shadow walkers we had evaded outside were undoubtedly closing in. We could feel their chilling presence growing steadily stronger behind us. Suddenly, the passage opened into a larger chamber, a vast cavern deep within the mountain. At its center, a pulsating rift, smaller than the one in the chasm but intensely concentrated, churned with dark energy. This was the crucible point, the heart of the crossing. And waiting for us, emerging from the shadows that clung to the cavern walls, were not just 2 or 3 shadow walkers. There were 5. Larger, more solidified than the lesser ones we had fought, their bark-like forms rippled with dark power. These were the Architect's elite, its chosen guardians. Their whispers were a coordinated attack, a chorus of despair and torment that hammered at my mind. "You cannot win. Your will is broken. She will fall. You will fall." "No," I roared, pushing back, channeling my defiance through my staffs. The veiled splitter and Ilara's staff flared with brilliant light, cutting through the oppressive gloom. "They are stronger here," Ilara cried, her staff ready. "The veil is thinnest, their power is magnified." We fought a desperate, swirling battle in the cavern's heart. The shadow walkers moved with terrifying speed, striking from all sides. I swung my staffs, blocking, deflecting, each blow infused with focused intent. The golden light of my staff and the silvery light of Ilara's became a whirlwind, holding back the encroaching darkness. One shadow walker lunged at Ilara, its claws extended. She parried with her staff, but the force of the blow sent her staggering, her connection momentarily wavering. "Ilara," I cried, turning to help her. But another shadow walker immediately seized the opportunity, its clawed hand tearing at my shoulder. A searing pain flared, a cold, dark energy seeping into the wound. I roared, bringing my cold iron knife up, plunging it into the creature's side. It shrieked, recoiling, black ichor boiling from the wound, but its touch had left a mark. a chilling cold that spread through my arm. We were being overwhelmed. They were too many, too strong in this place. Our combined light was powerful, but it was being stretched, weakened. The whispers intensified, gloating, sensing our despair. Suddenly, a strange, guttural roar echoed through the cavern, not from the shadow walkers, but from deeper within the mountain. The ground rumbled, and a shower of pebbles rained from the ceiling. The shadow walkers paused, their attention momentarily diverted. "What was that?" I gasped, seizing the moment to push back two attacking creatures. Alara's eyes widened. The mountain eaters, ancient beasts of the earth, they hate anything that disrupts the deep currents. As if on cue, the far wall of the cavern, a seemingly solid mass of rock, began to crack and crumble inwards. A massive, segmented body, its scales like jagged obsidian, its many eyes glowing with an inner, molten light, began to force its way into the chamber. It was colossal, its mouth filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. The shadow walkers shrieked, not in pain, but in outrage and frustration. Their focus split. The mountain eater was not a creature of the echo lands per se, but an elemental force of the deep earth, awakened by the massive disruption of the thinning veil. It saw the shadow walkers as an unnatural corruption, a parasitic infestation on its domain. It lunged, its massive head slamming into the nearest shadow walker, crushing it against the cavern wall with a sickening crunch. The shadow walker dissolved into a cloud of black smoke, screaming silently as it was annihilated. "Now, Noah, while they are distracted," Alara cried, pointing at the pulsating rift in the center of the chamber. The remaining shadow walkers were engaged in a desperate battle against the rampaging mountain eater, their dark energy crackling against its ancient, rocky hide. The cavern shook, rock dust filling the air. We sprinted towards the rift. It pulsed with an unstable, terrifying energy, the true heart of the thinning point. It was a doorway, but a violent, unpredictable one. "We need to disrupt it," Alara yelled over the din. "Sever their connection, but it will take everything we have." I nodded, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could feel the cold, seeping energy from the wound on my shoulder trying to drag me down. But the urgency of the moment, the terrifying vision of the architect and its army, spurred me on. We stood before the rift, staffs raised. The raw energy emanating from it was immense, threatening to rip us apart. The whispers here were no longer coherent, just a chaotic roar of primal malevolence screaming at our audacity. "Focus, Noah," Alara urged, her voice echoing the force of her will. "Pure intent, drive them back, seal the wound." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the power of the ley lines surge through me, pushing back against the chilling pain in my shoulder. I pictured Alara safe. I pictured my cabin undisturbed. I pictured Lydia, her calm, knowing smile. I pictured the ancient deer, a symbol of hope. I poured every ounce of my defiance, every shred of my strength, every fiber of my being into the staffs. The veiled splitter and Alara's staff blazed with an intensity that eclipsed even our blast at the moon pool. Gold and silver light intertwined, spiraling into a single blinding torrent of pure energy. "For the balance," I roared, and together we plunged the combined light into the heart of the rift. The world exploded. Not into chaos this time, but into a blinding, deafening symphony of pure power. The rift screamed, a sound of agony and fury, and began to buckle, to tear at its own edges. The cavern was bathed in an incandescent light that burned away the shadows, revealing the grotesque forms of the struggling shadow walkers as they shrieked and dissolved under the onslaught. The Mountain Eater paused, its many eyes blinking, as if momentarily stunned by the raw, unfettered energy. The rift pulsed, trying to resist, trying to reform, but our combined will was too strong. The light poured into it, twisting, tearing, severing. It was like driving a white-hot stake through the heart of the darkness. Then, with a final, shuddering groan, the rift imploded. The blinding light collapsed inwards, leaving behind a residual shimmer, a scar on the very fabric of reality. The crushing malevolence that had filled the cavern receded, replaced by an echoing silence. The surviving shadow walkers, those not consumed by the implosion, vanished, their forms dissolving into fleeing shadows. Even the Mountain Eater, its purpose fulfilled, paused for a moment, then slowly began to burrow back into the rock, its roars fading into a distant rumble. We stood there panting, leaning on our staffs, utterly drained. My body ached, every muscle screaming in protest, but a profound sense of triumph, of accomplishment, surged through me. We had done it. We had severed a major thinning point. Ilara slumped to her knees, her staff clattering to the ground. "Remarkable," she whispered, her voice hoarse, but a wide, genuine smile on her lips. "You truly are remarkable, Noah Grant." I dropped down beside her, my own staff supporting me. My shoulder still throbbed, but the dark, insidious cold had receded, replaced by a dull ache. "We did it," I said, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "It's closed." She nodded, looking at the shimmering, scarred space where the rift had been. "For now, but it will attempt to reopen, and the architect, it will not forget this. You have drawn its ire, Noah. You are now a champion of the Veil, whether you wished it or not." I looked at my hand, at the cold iron knife still clutched within. My journey, which had begun with a desperate search for a lost love, had transformed into something far larger, far more dangerous. "So what now?" I asked, looking at the shimmering scar, at the quiet cavern. "How do we get back?" Ilara picked up her staff, its light still strong. "The energy released by that severance, it will create a temporary opening, a ripple in the veil, not a stable thinning point, but a momentary window. We must find it. Now." She pulled the Seeker's stone from my pocket. It pulsed frantically, not with the guided rhythm it had used before, but with a chaotic, urgent beat, pointing in a completely new direction, deeper into the mountain, away from the fissure we had entered. "It is unstable," she warned. "A temporary portal. We must be swift and very, very focused." We pushed ourselves up, drawing on the last reserves of our strength. The air in the cavern was still heavy with residual power, but the oppressive malevolence was gone. We followed the frantic pulse of the Seeker's stone deeper into the intricate network of tunnels within the mountain. The way was dark, treacherous, riddled with new illusions as the veil rippled around us, but we held firm, our hands clasped, our staffs held high. The tunnels twisted and turned, seeming to defy logic, but the stone's frantic beat was an unwavering guide. We climbed, we descended, we squeezed through impossibly tight spaces, the echo lands themselves seeming to shift and writhe around us, trying to disorient, to dissuade. Finally, the tunnel opened into a small, naturally formed archway, a smooth curve of ancient rock. And through it, I saw a familiar light, not the emerald glow of the Echo lands, but the soft, warm light of a late autumn afternoon. My heart leaped, my world. "This is it, Noah," Elira said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and solemnity. "A momentary bridge. We must cross now before it closes." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The passage through the veil was never easy, never without its trials. But this time I was ready. I was not the terrified woodsman who had stumbled blindly into this realm. I was changed. "Together," I said, meeting Alara's gaze, my hand tightening on hers. She nodded, a small, weary smile on her lips. "Together." We stepped through the archway, into the shimmering curtain that marked the veil. The world exploded into the familiar chaos of sensation, the rushing wind, the swirling colors, the whispering voices that tried to ensnare my mind. But this time they were weaker, more fractured. The rupture we had created in the echo lands had left its mark, opening a passage that was less stable, less defined, but also less controlled by the architect. I held onto Alara's hand, our connection a grounding force. My staffs were still clutched in my other hand, their lights blazing, pushing back against the disorienting assault. I focused on my intent, on my mantra. I am Noah Grant. I am bringing her home. We are closing the door. The journey through the veil felt shorter this time, less violent. The pulls and tugs were still there, but I was able to resist them, to navigate the currents with a clarity I hadn't possessed before. I could sense the boundary, the transition, the faint, shimmering line that separated the two worlds. Then, with a soft pop, like a bubble bursting, we were through. I stumbled, blinking, onto a forest floor covered in crisp, fallen leaves. The air was cool and smelled of pine and damp earth, a familiar, comforting scent. The sun, a warm, golden orb, filtered through the branches of towering firs. Birds chirped in the distance, a natural, melodic sound. I looked around. We were in a dense part of Blackwood Ridge, but not near the Whispering Falls, nor any of the thinning points I knew. This was deeper, wilder, a place off the maps, but unmistakably my world. Alara stood beside me, swaying slightly, her eyes wide as she took in the familiar surroundings. The silver light of her staff dimmed, then winked out, as if sensing the absence of the Echo Land's potent magic. My own veiled splitter still glowed faintly, a testament to its connection to both realms, but its energy, too, was muted by the different ambient energies of my world. She breathed deeply, her chest rising and falling. "Home," she whispered, a sense of profound relief washing over her face. "Truly home." I looked at her, at the familiar lines of her face, the way her dark braids fell around her shoulders. She was here. She was safe. The overwhelming burden lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated joy. "You're here," I said, my voice thick with emotion, and pulled her into a tight embrace. She stiffened for a moment, surprised, then slowly, tentatively returned the hug, burying her face in my shoulder. We stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other, the quiet joy of our return washing over us. The birds chirped, the sun shone, and for a brief, precious moment, the world felt normal again. But the moment passed, replaced by the grim reality of our situation. We had closed a rift, but the war was far from over. The architect would be enraged. The veil was still thinning, and my world was still largely oblivious to the creeping darkness. Alara pulled back, her gray eyes serious. "We need to find Lydia," she said. "She will know what to do. She will have felt the disruption, the closing of the rift, and we need to prepare. The architect will not give up. It will find other ways, other doors." I nodded, gripping my staffs. My shoulder still ached, a tangible reminder of the battle we had just fought. And we need to warn them, I added, my gaze sweeping the familiar trees now imbued with a new, deeper meaning. All of them before it's too late. We began to walk, moving with purpose through the familiar yet newly perceived landscape of Blackwood Ridge. The Seeker's Stone, which had fallen silent after the crossing, now lay heavy and inert in my pocket. Its purpose for now was fulfilled. As we walked, the forest seemed different to me. I could still feel the faint hum of the ley lines beneath the earth, but they were softer, less intense than in the Echo lands. The trees were just trees, no longer imbued with watchful spirits, no longer shifting with unseen energies. Yet the subtle shifts, the hidden currents, the whispers of the other world, I now perceived them all. I was no longer just Noah Grant, the woodsman. I was a bridge between worlds. We walked for hours, heading towards the edge of the wilderness, towards the nearest road, towards civilization. Ilara was quiet, observing everything, her senses alert. I tried to process all that had happened, all that I had seen, all that I had become. The weight of responsibility, of knowledge, was immense. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long, purple shadows through the trees, we broke through the last line of dense pines and saw it, a gravel road, familiar and mundane, stretching into the distance. It was a lifeline back to my world, back to people, back to Lydia. But just as we stepped onto the gravel, a flicker of movement caught my eye. From the deepest shadows of the forest, just beyond the tree line, a figure emerged. It was human, or appeared to be. Tall, gaunt, dressed in dark, simple clothing. But its face was hidden by a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, and its movements were eerily silent, too fluid, too unnatural. It held something in its hand. Not a staff, but a long, slender blade, dark as obsidian, shimmering with a faint, malevolent energy. It was not a shadow walker, not in the way I knew them, but the oppressive cold, the acrid scent of ozone, the creeping dread that emanated from it, it was unmistakable. Noah, Ilara whispered, her hand tightening on my arm, her staff instinctively rising. Another one, but different, more subtle. The figure raised its head slowly. I couldn't make out its features beneath the hat, but I felt its gaze, cold and ancient like ice. It was watching us, waiting. "He's here," I murmured, my blood running cold. "The architect," he sent a herald. The figure took a step forward, then another, its movements slow, deliberate, each step radiating a quiet, unwavering menace. It wasn't rushing. It was a statement, a promise. The shadow walker in a new form had found us, and it was waiting for us to make our next move. The figure on the gravel road was a study in stillness, a silent sentinel that seemed to absorb the fading light of dusk. It didn't move, didn't breathe, yet its presence was a physical weight in the air, a cold pressure that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. The long, slender blade in its hand wasn't drawn in a threatening posture, but merely held, its dark, obsidian surface reflecting no light, only absorbing it. "Don't look directly at it, Noah," Ilara whispered, her grip on my arm tightening. Her staff, though dim in this world, felt warm against my hand where our fingers brushed. Its gaze, it can ensnare. I tore my eyes away from the figure's shadowed face, focusing instead on the ground before us, on the familiar crunch of gravel beneath our boots. My shoulder throbbed, a dull echo of the shadow walker's cold touch, but my staffs felt alive in my other hand, a reassuring hum against the encroaching dread. The veiled splitter's carved eye pulsed faintly, reflecting the subtle shifts in the air around the creature. It's waiting, I murmured, my voice low. It wants us to make the first move. Or for us to fear, Alara countered, her voice steady despite the tension. Fear is its most potent weapon here. It draws strength from it. The silence stretched thick and heavy. The forest, which had just moments ago been filled with the cheerful chirping of birds, now held its breath. Even the gentle rustle of leaves seemed to cease. It was as if the world itself was holding an anxious pause. "What is it?" I asked, my gaze flicking to its dark form. "It's not like the others." "A scout, perhaps," Alara mused, her eyes narrowed. "A more refined instrument of the architect. They adapt quickly, find ways to bypass the Veil's natural defenses. This one, it has learned to wear the guise of your world, to blend, to deceive." The figure moved a single, fluid step forward. It made no sound, no crunch of gravel, no rustle of clothing. It simply was closer. The air grew colder, and the faint, acrid scent of ozone intensified. The malevolent energy from the blade intensified, radiating a chilling promise. "We can't fight it here," I said, looking around. The road was open, exposed. The forest, though close, offered little immediate cover against such a stealthy and powerful foe. Alara nodded, her eyes sweeping the surroundings. "No, its purpose is not to defeat us in open combat, not yet. It is to mark us, to sow terror, to confirm our return. And perhaps to observe your capabilities, Noah. The architect is learning about you." Another silent step. The figure was now less than 50 feet away. I could feel its cold, ancient gaze on us, though I still couldn't see its eyes. The whispers, faint but insidious, began to weave their way into my mind. "Lost, helpless. Your world is fragile. We will take it all." I pushed back, visualizing my shield, reinforcing the mental barrier Lydia had taught me. The whispers faltered, then turned into a frustrated hiss. "Run," Alara commanded, her voice firm. "Into the forest. Break its line of sight. We need to reach a place where the ley lines are stronger, where we can obscure our trail." Without another word, we turned and plunged into the dense woods flanking the road. The pine needles cushioned our steps, making our escape swift and silent. I could feel the figure's gaze follow us for a moment, then the oppressive cold seemed to diffuse, its direct focus broken. We ran, weaving through the familiar trees, Alara setting a furious pace. My breath came in ragged gasps, but my new stamina held. My connection to the ley lines, though softer here, allowed me to perceive the subtle currents of energy in the earth, guiding me instinctively to areas of denser growth, to places where the forest felt older, more alive. We didn't stop until we reached a small, rocky outcrop, partially hidden by a curtain of hanging moss. We crouched, catching our breath, listening. The forest was still unnaturally quiet, but the intense cold, the acrid scent, had faded. The direct pressure was gone. "It didn't follow," I whispered, surprised. Alara shook her head. "Not immediately. That is not its way. It is a scout, a tracker. It will observe, map our movements, report back. Then perhaps it will strike, or others will." "So we're being hunted again," I said, a grim knot forming in my stomach. The relief of being home was short-lived. "Always," she replied, her gaze distant. "But this time we are home, and here we have allies, we have a chance to prepare." The thought of Lydia brought a surge of purpose. We need to get to her, she'll know about this, she'll have answers. Indeed, Alara agreed, pushing herself to her feet. But we cannot walk openly. We must remain unseen. We cannot lead the architect's vanguard directly to her. We moved through the forest like phantoms, skirting the trails, avoiding any sign of human habitation. The sun had set, and the woods were bathed in the deep indigo of twilight. My staff still glowed faintly, but Alara's staff remained dark, a clear indicator of the difference in magical resonance between worlds. As we journeyed, the subtle signs of the thinning veil in my world became more apparent to me. I noticed the way the shadows clung a little too deep beneath certain trees, the faint, shimmering distortions in the air above stagnant pools, the unnatural chill in isolated pockets of the woods. My heightened senses, now attuned to the echo lands, picked up these deviations, these tiny fissures in the fabric of reality. "It's worse than I thought," I murmured to Alara as we paused by a particularly gnarled oak, its bark seeming to twist into distorted faces in the gloom. "The veil really is thinning everywhere." Alara nodded, her expression grim. "The architect has been busy. The closing of that major rift was a temporary victory, Noah, but it was also a warning shot. It knows of your power now, knows of our intent. It will escalate its efforts." We walked for hours, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate urgency. My shoulder throbbed, a constant reminder of the battle in the crucible, but I ignored it, pushing through the pain. My primary concern was getting Alara to safety and warning Lydia. Finally, as the moon, a sliver of silver, rose above the trees, we spotted the faint glow of distant lights, the edge of the small town of Blackwood Ridge. "We can't go into town," Alara said immediately. "Too many eyes, too many chances to be seen, to be followed. We need to reach Lydia without alerting anyone else." "Her cabin is further out past the old mill," I confirmed. "It's isolated, that's where we'll go." We circumvented the town, moving through fields and along old deer trails, our path guided by the faint glow of the distant stars and my new internal compass for the lay of the land. The cold iron knife was still clutched in my hand, a silent comfort. It was well past midnight when we finally approached Lydia's cabin. It stood alone, a small, unassuming structure nestled deep in the woods, far from any paved road. A single light burned in a window, a beacon of hope in the darkness. "Wait here," I whispered to Alara, pulling her behind a thick stand of pines. "I'll go in first, confirm it's her and that it's safe." She nodded, her hand already on the hilt of her staff. "Be careful, Noah. The architect's reach is long, even here." I approached the cabin cautiously, my staffs held ready, my senses on high alert. No sound, no unusual scent, no shimmer of distortion in the air. The small garden was as orderly as ever, the porch swing empty. Everything seemed normal, utterly mundane. I knocked softly on the wooden door. "Silence." I knocked again, a little louder. After a moment, the light in the window brightened, and I heard a shuffling sound from within. Then, the creak of the door opening. Lydia stood in the doorway, her gray hair disheveled, her spectacles askew on her nose. She was dressed in a thick woolen robe, and a book lay open in her hand. Her eyes, usually calm and discerning, were wide with a mixture of shock and profound relief when they landed on me. "Noah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it truly you?" "It's me, Lydia," I said, a wave of emotion washing over me. I wanted to tell her everything, to collapse into the embrace of her calm wisdom, but I held back, glancing over my shoulder. I'm not alone. Ilara is with me, and we have a lot to tell you. Lydia's gaze flicked past me, her eyes seeming to pierce the darkness of the woods. A subtle tremor passed through her. I felt it, she murmured, her voice barely audible. The tear in the veil, the surge of raw energy, and then the reverberations of a massive closure. I knew it must be you. She stepped aside, opening the door wider. Come in, both of you, quickly. I motioned to Ilara, who emerged from the shadows, her form still and wary, her staff held loosely in her hand. Lydia's eyes widened further at the sight of her, a flicker of ancient recognition passing between them. Ilara, Lydia said, her voice filled with respect. It has been too long, and yet I know you are unchanged. Lydia, Ilara responded, her voice softer than I had ever heard it, a genuine warmth in her tone. The veil thins, and our time grows short. We stepped into the small, cozy cabin. The scent of old books and herbal tea filled the air, a comforting antidote to the cold malice of the Echo lands. Lydia closed the door firmly, securing the latch, then turned to face us, her expression now serious and focused. Sit, she instructed, gesturing to the two worn armchairs by the crackling fireplace. Tell me everything from the beginning. As Ilara and I recounted our journey, from the moment I stumbled into the Echo lands to our terrifying encounter with the architect's herald on the road, Lydia listened in rapt silence. Her eyes, magnified by her spectacles, absorbed every detail, occasionally closing as if to better feel the truth of our words. She made no interjections, no gasps of surprise, simply absorbed the harrowing tale. When I described my growing connection to the ley lines, my ability to sense the veil's thinning, and the power that had flowed through me at the moon pool and the crucible point, a faint, approving smile touched her lips. You have awakened Noah, she said softly, her gaze holding mine. The ancient blood in your lineage, once dormant, now sings. You are no longer merely a woodsman, but a conduit, a guardian of the veil, whether by birthright or by ordeal. Guardian, I repeated, the word feeling immense, almost too heavy. Ilara nodded. It is a title of responsibility, Noah, and power. Your ancestors, the old blood, were keepers of the balance. Your connection is deeper than you know. Lydia then turned to Ilara. The architect has indeed grown bolder. This manifestation, this herald, it is a significant escalation. It means it is preparing a full assault. We closed a major rift, I interjected. It imploded. That must have bought us some time, right? Ilara and Lydia exchanged a look, a shared, grim understanding passing between them. A momentary reprieve, perhaps, Ilara conceded, but also a challenge. You injured it, Noah. You thwarted its direct plan. The architect sees you now as a direct threat. It will not rest until it has consumed you or corrupted you. Corrupted me. Lydia leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. The shadow walkers at their core are beings of pure intent and malevolence, but the architect, it is more. It is a consciousness, an ancient entity that feeds on fear, despair, and most potently the corruption of life and light. It seeks to warp, to twist, to turn hope into its opposite. Your anger, Noah, Ilara reminded me, her voice gentle. Remember what I said. The architect will try to stoke that fire, to turn it into a weapon against you. A chill ran down my spine. The rage I had felt, the raw, burning fury against the shadow walkers, now seemed like a dangerous vulnerability. What about the others? I asked, thinking of the online forum of the nascent network Lydia had hinted at. Are there more of us, people who know? Lydia's expression softened. Yes, Noah, more than you know, small pockets, disparate groups. People who have glimpsed the truth, sensed the shifts, felt the veil thinning. Some are born with the sight, others awaken to it. But they are scattered, unorganized, and largely unaware of the true scope of the war. So we warn them, I stated, a renewed sense of purpose taking hold. We tell them what's coming, we show them how to fight. Precisely, Lydia said, a glint in her eye. Which is why your return is so vital, Noah. You have seen it with your own eyes, you have fought it, and you have returned with a living witness. She gestured to Alara. The architect will try to isolate you, Alara warned, to make you doubt, to make you feel alone. It will use illusions, psychic assaults, anything to break your will before it strikes directly. So what's the plan? I asked, gripping my staffs. How do we fight an enemy that can shapeshift, turn invisible, and attack our minds? How do we prepare a world that doesn't even know it's in danger? Lydia rose and walked to a large oak table in the corner of the room, covered with maps, ancient texts, and strange polished stones. We start with knowledge, Noah. We consolidate our understanding, and we begin to forge a unified front. The whispers of the architect will intensify in the coming days. They will seek to sow discord, to spread panic, to draw out those who are sensitive to the veil. She picked up a small, intricately carved wooden box. The veil is a complex barrier woven from belief, perception, and the natural energies of this world. When that belief falters, when connection to the land weakens, the veil thins, the architect exploits these weaknesses. Alara pointed to a map spread across the table, charting various ley lines and nodes across North America. There are other thinning points, minor ones mostly, but the architect will seek to strengthen them to open new doors. It needs to establish multiple beachheads if it intends a full invasion. Invasion, I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. It wants to come here. Lydia nodded grimly. It seeks to merge the worlds, Noah, to collapse the veil completely, to turn your vibrant, living world into an extension of its own desolate, corrupted realm. A new hunting ground. Then we have to stop it, I said, my voice firm. But how? What's our first move? Lydia turned, a determined glint in her eyes. First, we rest. You both need to recover. Your body, Noah, is still adjusting to the immense power you channeled, and Alara needs to reattune to the energies of this world. Her staff's light may be dim, but its ancient heartwood is still strong. She looked at my shoulder. That wound, it's not just physical. It carries the architect's touch. We need to cleanse it, or it will fester, spiritually as well as physically. I nodded, feeling the lingering cold in my arm. Then, Lydia continued, we reach out. The online forum, as you call it, Noah, is a starting point. But there are others. Old families, isolated covens, quiet hermits who have protected this world for generations. We must awaken them, bring them into the fold. And the architect's herald, I asked. The one on the road, it's still out there. Indeed, Alara replied, her gaze sharp. It will watch, it will learn, but it is not invincible. And here, in your world, its power is diluted. It needs a point of direct connection to the echo lands to maintain its full strength. We exploited that weakness when we severed the rift. So it's not as strong here. Not yet, Lydia clarified, but it grows stronger with every act of fear, every disturbance of the veil. Its goal is to create enough instability, enough openings to bring its full power and its armies across. We spent the next few days in Lydia's cabin, recovering and planning. Lydia, with her vast knowledge of the veil and its intricacies, became our strategic center. She applied poultices of herbs to my shoulder, drawing out the lingering coldness from the shadow walker's touch. The wound began to heal slowly, but the ache persisted, a constant reminder of the architect's malevolent power. Ilara immersed herself in the subtle energies of my world, meditating by the creek behind Lydia's cabin, allowing her ancient staff to draw on the local ley lines. Its light, though still not as vibrant as in the Echo Lands, began to pulse with a faint, silvery glow, a sign of its reawakening. She taught me more about sensing the architect's agents, how to discern their subtle distortions in the environment, even how to counter their mental whispers. Their power lies in deception, in fear, in finding weakness, Ilara explained one afternoon as we practiced staff forms in a clearing. But they are not truly invisible. The veil ripples around them. They leave traces, energetic signatures. Your connection, Noah, allows you to perceive these. My own staffs, the veiled splitter and Ilara's, felt like extensions of my will. I practiced channeling my intent, focusing my defiance into blasts of light, learning to control the raw power that now surged through me. My movements grew more fluid, my aim more precise. The cold iron knife, which I still carried, became a natural extension of my hand, a last resort against truly resilient foes. Lydia, meanwhile, was busy making contact. She used old, encrypted communication methods, sending out-coded messages to her network, to the disparate groups she knew. She also began to prepare a more public-facing message, one designed to subtly awaken awareness without inciting panic. We can't just tell the world about interdimensional monsters, I pointed out during one strategy session. They'll lock us up or think we're crazy. Precisely, Lydia agreed. The truth must be revealed in stages, in ways that resonate with existing fears and concerns. We speak of environmental degradation, of unexplained phenomena, of the growing darkness within. We tap into the intuitive understanding that something is deeply wrong without revealing the full, terrifying scope of it yet. They will not believe until they see, Ilara added, her voice practical. And by then, it may be too late. Then we give them evidence, I said, a thought forming. Subtle evidence, ways to sense it themselves, even if they don't understand what they're sensing. Over the next few days, we formulated a plan. Lydia would continue to build the network, consolidating knowledge and preparing for the inevitable. Ilara and I, as the most direct witnesses and fighters, would become active agents. Our first task, identify a key thinning point in the mortal world, one the architect was likely targeting for a new breach, and prepare to defend it. The ley lines, Noah, they will guide us, Lydia explained, pointing to a section of her map. There are several powerful nodes in this region, ancient places of power that the architect would find appealing. One in particular, the old standing stones in the Whispering Gorge. It's a place of ancient power and deeply connected to your lineage, Ilara. Ilara's eyes lit up with recognition. The gorge, yes, it has been a sacred place for my people for centuries, a natural nexus. If the architect were to open a rift there, it would be catastrophic. Then that's where we go, I declared, my resolve firm. We find that herald, we find the shadow walkers, and we stop